questions, get rolling. I'll call us to order. Good luck.
You're supposed to actually stay left. Yeah. Well, I'll just kick off really quick. I don't have too much to say again, other than today will really be led by Ron and Jen on the staff side for going through the financial piece. Really want to make sure there's a lot of stuff in here. I know, especially for a lot of us that are newer to all of this, that there's probably new terms and things we don't know. So do not hesitate to ask dumb questions. I'll plan to ask a few dumb questions. But I think really tonight is not just to give feedback to staff, but for us to make sure we are informed on what we're doing. Because once we commit to these policies, we want to make sure through the year we're holding to them and making sure staff can work on what we've given them direction for. So feel free to ask questions. And it sounds like we've got some really big conversation pieces. Some of these will just be a quick yes, no, do we want to keep this policy? Otherwise, I'll hand it to Ron and let you guys take it.
All right, well, thank you everyone. So here we are, night 2, goal setting. Tonight's going to be primarily about financial things that we're going to look at, financial policies. We have a few of the larger projects at the end that we'll highlight and talk about. There's going to be more projects in the coming sessions, but so maybe just kick off a few kind of comments as we start forward. You know, every time we start to talk about finances, it always seems like a doom and gloom kind of a scenario. And I want to assure you that here in Cedar Falls, we're in a strong financial shape. So that's one thing that's very, very good. I think, and it's also very obvious by, you know, AAA bond rating. So we are in good financial shape. But in order to stay in good financial shape, and the way that we got here is we created a number of financial policies that we'll go over tonight, and you know, using these sound financial policies, you have to kind of stick to as we move forward. Otherwise, you know, it gets diluted, and as Moody's looks at our financial standing, that is one of the things they look at is what are your financial policies and what are your practices and the capital improvements. So, but again, that's, I think sometimes financial policies are hard, and that's where the doom and gloom seems to come in, but we are in very good financial shape, and we'll go through a number of those as we go through the process. I think one of the things that was a little bit disappointing last year's budget cycle is yes, we did get to a 0% for residential, but we kind of threw out all of our financial policies along the way, which, you know, I'll just use a couple examples here. So the hotel motel monies that we use, those are one-time monies, and yes, the council does have that, but in the financial policy, those policies are allocated towards things like parks and those things. So those are monies that are now lost that could have been allocated or programmed towards that. That's just a small example. Another thing with keeping the tax rate a little bit lower, and none of us knew this at the time, but House File 718 really created some challenges, and it's going to create some challenges moving forward with how cities do that. So, and we'll go over a lot of that stuff in depth. So, again, the purpose tonight is really to go over, review, and go over these financial policies and the CIP. And as we move forward with that, give any background. I know there's brand new elected officials, and there's some elected officials that really haven't been through this but a handful of times. So every time we go through, we learn and try to. So ask questions. Please ask questions as we move forward here. So as we go through here, some of these policies may seem very simple, and yeah, why don't we do that? But I want to make sure that you realize they are financial policies, and here's what we need to do as we move forward. And so again, ask questions on that. Once in a while, as we get going through here, I catch myself going pretty quickly, so if we need to, I'll slow down. And one of the things when we set these presentations up is, in particular, the financial policies. And And sometimes it's not going to seem like it runs very smoothly, because we're going to talk about different aspects of different things. We may talk about TIF, and I'll give you the background on TIF and some of the financial policies within TIF. But then later in the presentations, we may talk about different other aspects of economic development for the TIF and some of those things. So we may be talking briefly about a portion of it, but then coming back. So that's just kind of some introductory remarks. I know we're going to probably have a long evening, and we'll kind of move forward with that. But as I said, yeah, one of the things that you're going to be asked to do, and I'll flip right to it, is very early in your session in January, we're going to be looking at trying to get a capital improvements program completed. So one of the handouts that we have for you this evening are these two documents, which is the preliminary capital improvements program, and then it's also the capital improvements program that's unfunded. It's the unfunded list. So as we march through here, the CIP is only a planning document. So we look at these planning documents for a number of reasons. One of the biggest reasons is the second to last bullet point there is actually to organize our GO sales. And I'll get into the GO sales in just a little bit, but we sell bonds every other year. And so trying to hit some of those policies is what we want to make sure that we do. As you can see on this document, and as we move forward, there's a key at the very end, which will tell you the different abbreviations for what different funding sources may be. You may come across a project that could have 5, 6, 7, 8 funding sources. So both of these preliminary at this time. As we go, there may be projects that aren't on either list that come up that the council wants to look at. There may be projects on one list or the other that go back and forth. So we'll really have to work out how that goes. So it also helps us plan out some of our projects and when they're going to go, or our rate structures, for instance, rate structures for sanitary sewer projects, rate structures for stormwater projects, rate structures for refuse. So just generally, I know that's kind of a big broad overview. Any questions on the CIP or those type of things for right now? So I mentioned bonding, and so let's talk. Typically, the city uses two types of a bonding process, and that's our revenue bonds. Revenue bonds are typically backed by revenues of certain enterprise funds, such as refuse, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, those type of things. They're a little bit higher interest rate, but the good thing about that is they actually don't have impact, typically don't have impact on property taxes. The second is general obligation bonds. Those general obligation bonds are really backed by by property taxes. We typically have a lower interest rate on general obligation bonds. We also have a lower interest rate because as bidders look at our AAA rating, we get a better rating on those. Now, the last few years when the interest rates were low, it typically didn't seem like the dollar figure is there, but as we start getting 4, 5, 6% interest rates, and you're talking about $5, $6 million projects, those interest rates really help us out. So with general obligation bonds, you have to have an essential corporate purpose. So the things with that is streets, sidewalks, fire, police, no limitation typically on the sale of the bonds. So if you have, the only limitation on those is really our bonding capacity. The other is the general corporate purpose, blah, blah. Sorry about that. General corporate purpose bonds. So those are typically what quality of life projects. So if you have parks, trails, pools, those things. Now, this is a new number this year. We can do those. So for instance, the river project, quality of life, it's our bonding capacity on that was 700,000 this past year. The state, because of our population, is now we can do those projects up to 910,000. But if we are looking at like the river project and we wanted to bond for that whole thing, what would happen is it would have to go to a referendum to the citizens.
Is that a per year amount, the 910
It's a per project amount.
per project?
So we'll go back to there.
At what
So-
point does it go to a referendum, sorry?
So if you're looking to, let's say you wanted to build a brand new pool and you wanted to use all bonding, if it's over the 910,000, it would go for a referendum.
Just for clarification, the 700, the increase from that previous year, was that population-based or valuation-based?
So it was population-based, but it was also a change in the code allowing it to go up.
Yep.
So
Yep.
So, gonna start off right here with a couple of policy questions. And so, what the city of Cedar Falls practice for a long time has been is only issue replacement debt. And so that amount is typically between $3.5 and $4 million each year. So in 2022, you can see we sold bonds at 3.8 million. And my notes here. And then in our CIP, you can see we've looked at 2024, 2026, and 28. So we typically try to balance those amounts between that 3.5 and $4 million bond sale. And the reason we do that is because you don't have the spikes in property taxes. So I'll back up a little bit more here, and so two things. The first one is we try to sell bonds on the even years. CFU sells bonds in the odd years. And the reason that happens is because we are looked at as almost one and the same because they are a municipally owned utility. So their bonding and our bonding is kind of viewed in the financial world as the same. A little hiccup last year. So CFU has joined now a consortium. And so that consortium, they sell bonds within that. And they sell the consortium sells bonds several times a year. So we may get away from a little bit the every other year. And the reason for that is because it may not matter, because even if CFU is not selling bonds within the consortium, as being part of it affects us. So so we'll have to monitor that as we move forward.
Could you really quick explain why that matters, the amount per year, because of the max we can have for the government?
So, well, maybe I don't fully understand your question, but the amount that we sell bonds for, the amount that we typically try to keep between that 3.5 and 4 million is because of the tax rates. Now, if the advantage of selling under $10 million bonds is that there's a different category which is called bank qualified. And so you can sell those bonds as bank qualified. And that gives some banks some additional incentives to purchase those bonds because they get some tax rate. And what happened in 2022 is when CFU sold their bonds and we had ours sold, it went over the $10 million, so it wasn't in the bank qualified amount anymore. So we had to go back and do some rectification there. But so anyway, again, those are kind of what we're shooting for. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier about having to go back and forth on some of these things, if you look at 2028, one of the reasons 2028 is at 5.8 million is currently we have the ladder truck in as a CIP item, and the reason it's in year 2028 is because that'll be the year it's 30 years old. So we've had that piece of equipment that long. It's looking at about a $2.1 million purchase as of now if we looked at moving forward with that purchase right now. So so we're going to have to look at, okay, are there other projects that we move around, or is that one that we're probably just looking at that may exceed what we do? I want to go back, as I was speaking there, I want to go back and talk about the CIP one more time. if you look on there, on the columns, we have fiscal year '24 is the first column where the funding is. That's the current year we're in. So all of those numbers are under budget, are under an approved budget right now. The FY '25, those are the years that if this CIP was approved, that we're moving forward to move into this year's budget. So
By saying under budget, you mean included in the budget?
So included in the FY 2024 budget. FY '25, that's what we're looking at right now for including in what you would approve in calendar year '25. So
We're not necessarily tonight trying to prove
Nope.
the CIP, we're just looking at the policy.
we're looking at the
how
policies.
much. Yep.
So the first real question is are we okay with only issuing replacement debt? And again, what we look like we have, if that policy is, we're looking at about 3.5 million in bond sales as the current CIP is.
No,
As we all know, interest rates have gone up dramatically. The bonds we're replacing, can they continue on, or are they all mature? Are they due?
So some of them are being paid off, some of them have been refinanced, so.
Yeah, I mean, what we currently have, our debt outstanding right now, we already have maturity dates on them. So I think what you're asking is, when we sell new bonds in 2024, they're truly new bonds with new maturity dates. We can't like tack them on to current ones. I
No,
thought maybe that's what you're
yeah.
asking.
But I'm saying, the new interest rate we'd sell them at is dramatically higher, probably double
Oh,
or
yeah,
triple.
definitely. It's gonna be
Can we
higher.
extend our current bonds in any way, instead of paying them off with new debt that's higher? Or they all mature out?
They all mature out.
And
Yeah.
there's a payment schedule with
Right.
those.
Okay. I just-
Now, obviously, we've done the opposite. You know, when rates are lower, we've refinanced. You know, we've gone and done those, but of course, we wouldn't want to do that now. Like you said, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
But yeah, but you're right. When we sell bonds this next time, we definitely will have more interest expense in those bonds.
I was talking with him the other day, I know it seems like a little chicken and the egg because the amount we do is based on what projects we want to do. I know right now, especially with a lot of us new, we haven't had a chance to go through and talk about what projects we want to do, but, so I know right now, we're kind of deciding if we want to stick with the replacement debt. We can do more, and I think, what I was saying, especially with those last few points there, we're at a very low usage rate of our total capacity, but I think that is a bigger conversation about, because that means taking on more debt, which means raising that money through either taxes or something else. So I don't feel like we're ready tonight to be able to say, let's just increase that, because we haven't talked about what we want to do yet. So my general thought was, if I can, that we probably just want to leave it for this year as the replacement debt.
That and the fact that we're maybe at a peak in interest rates. We're starting to talk more, the economists, procrastinators, or what have you, that we might see rates coming
Sure.
back down, possibly quickly, possibly not. You know, it's economists and guessing. But if we wait to issue anything more than what we have to replace, maybe get cheaper rates.
And right now, like we say, there's 3.5 million in the current CIP. So that still leaves about $500,000 if other projects were added this year to stay within the policy.
And I don't want to get in the weeds, but we can't break up that ladder truck cost into multiple years, or is that already in consideration?
So we're getting some clarity on that. So the interesting thing, and we'll get into this as we get down the road on a number of topics as well, but we're talking about supply chain and how some of these things, I think Brian's come to you and talked to you about purchasing snowplows and trying to find those. What we found out, what I found out today is Director Birdie and his staff. So if we were to order a ladder truck today, it's 900 days out. So that's 2.5 years. So, you know, and so some of the funding is how do you do that? Because if I back up here just one slide, you see, so when you have a state, you have to state the purpose of the bonds, and they must be spent generally within 24 months. So already we're talking if we sell bonds. So we'll have to see if, does a down payment in one bond sale, for instance, if we were able to sell half the bonds for 2026 and then half the bonds in 2028, can we get a better price on the vehicle? So those are just some of the things that we'll still have to strategize, and we have some years, but I would imagine that we'll start in talking about the truck in 2025, 2026, about getting the order so we can get it by 28.
Real quick question. So Ron or Craig, do we have some accumulating provision in our regular budget for this so we don't have to bond, or is it just so hard to guess the number we don't set aside for it at all?
We don't set aside for like those the fire engines and the ladder truck, that those are purchased separately like this through CIP.
Is that something we can direct a shift in policy to start doing that so that we don't have to bond in 30 years?
Yeah.
I mean, I just wonder
Yeah.
if there's a preclusion against it.
No,
If there's
it's-
not, I'd like to start saving up.
It's very similar to what we've done with like our public safety building in our city hall. I think you're kind of suggesting kind of the same.
I'm not suggesting just setting aside excesses. I'm
Sure.
saying setting
Oh,
the
okay.
excesses into the annual budget
Sure.
like a homeowner would.
Sure.
I'm going to need this money next year, so I'm going to start saving it
Sure.
every month. Just curious.
Question on that, I'm assuming we have to put a significant down payment on an order, 20%?
So what I saw today was no, necessarily you wouldn't, but I think it may move you up in the line or may move some of those things if you start doing, yeah. So yes.
Makes sense.
Talk sense.
All of a sudden, it's 300 days.
Well, then we can bond for it and spend it in 20.
Yeah.
Say, what color do you want? We'll deliver it soon.
So again, what I'm hearing is, and I don't think we actually take a vote since this is a work session, but what I'm hearing is consensus to continue with the policy of only issuing replacement debt. So, and the second one we'll kind of jump into right here is maintain a debt strategy that protects at least 25 to 30% of our capacity, bonding capacity. And so we really don't have a problem with that. If you look at the very bottom bullet point there, typically we're only using about 9% of our bonding capacity here in Cedar Falls, which is incredible. If you look at other cities across the state of Iowa, they're typically in the 50 to 70% range. So good financial management by the council
So
here.
our capacity is,
The capacity is 5% of your assessed valuations.
300, something like that.
Should we just, what is that value after last year's assessments?
So we don't know yet,
Okay.
but after last year's assessment, we may be able to tell you by this year's assessment.
Sure. So 5% is, we would have 190 million that we could have outstanding. We only have 13 million outstanding right now. Yep.
Puts it
Now-
in perspective.
Yeah. Big numbers.
Now, we all realize we have big projects coming up. For instance, the wastewater treatment facility, that's going to take some of our bonding capacity. But those will be things that we can talk about a little bit. So, okay, I just want to clarify, make sure. So maintain a debt strategy that protects at least 25 to 30% of our bonding capacity. I think that's a pretty simple one. I think everyone's fine with that.
Just to get really in the weeds, that 5% is CFU and Cedar Falls combined.
Yes.
So how does that impact us with the natural gas plant potential?
I just want to jump in. So it's only their general obligation debt. So if they've sold revenue debt, which most of the time CFU sells revenue debt, but every now and, yeah, it's just general obligation. Yep.
Thank you for the clarification there. So it sounded like we had consensus for that. This is kind of what Amy was getting to a little bit earlier about, silence is affirmation. Really, if you have a question on it or some of those, please let us know, because I want to make sure that we're not just assuming everybody's. So again, proposed timeline for the CIP. These first few dates, as you can see, is we're working through the process. We're trying to, by the middle of December, we'd really like to balance the CIP and get our maps and geo sales and all of those things corrected. So again, right away on January 2nd, we'll be looking at having a committee meeting, going over all of this information with you, and then holding the public hearing on the CIP and approved by council on the second meeting, which would be the 15th. So.
But it was 16 because of Martin Luther King.
Oh, right.
Good point.
Good
Good
point.
catch. So,
I always forget because we work on that.
okay, so now we get into some of the fun, not so fun stuff. So this is a really simple chart that I don't think explains a lot. So as an individual property, you pay your taxes, and there's three entities that determine that. Is really the state of Iowa, which sets the rollback, the county that sets the valuation, and then also the city council. That is where you come in and set the tax rate that will happen. So this year, we already know it's going to be an interesting, the whole process is going to be extremely interesting. And here's why. The rollback went this year in residential property from 54.65% down to 46.34%. That's a significant drop. The valuations, when we were in the middle of budget season last year, the county was nice enough to send out the new valuations. And so as we look, and I have some charts to go over this in a few screens here, as we look, a $100,000 house last year may not be the same value, and that $100,000 house necessarily didn't go up. If Gil's $100,000 house is the same as Chris's $100,000 house, they might not have went up the same percentage. So it's going to be awfully hard to try to determine what some of those numbers are. So we'll just kind of jump into it here. So here's some history on the rollback. As you can see, since about FY 15, it's been relatively steady, anywhere in the 54 to 56% range. And then you can see this year it's making that dramatic drop off, which goes down to that 46.34. So what happens when the residential drops? The property tax shift goes over to the commercial. So what you'll see in some of the charts here, you'll be able to see that what happens is the increase or decrease in commercial is much heavier in those years.
So Ron, just to clarify this, the homeowner's paying 54% of their value.
So this year it's going to be 46.34% of their value.
Okay.
See, last year it was the 54.65, and so this year it's. So $100,000 house, they're on the $46,000 they're paying taxes on. Okay, move forward here. Multi-residential rollback. So a number of years ago, and I'll go over this probably a couple of times, but a number of years ago, you guys are going to hear the term backfill. You're going to hear the term tax adjustment. But so in FY16, the state of Iowa, our good friends down at the legislature, decided that they were going to do some property tax reform. And in that, what they did with commercial property tax is they said, hey, if you own a commercial property, your assessment goes from 100% down to 90%. What they also did is they took multi-residential and they said, hey, we're going to go from 100%, and over the next 8 years, you're going to go all the way down to a residential property tax. So that really started in FY17, where it was going down. The final year was in FY24, which is this year. So this particular chart here for Cedar Falls is about $9 million loss in valuations. So so when the state of Iowa did that, they came in and said to communities, hey, we're going to provide you additional funding, which they referred to as the backfill. And so that backfill then did not cover any of the multi-residential losses. What it did try to cover, but it was short of covering, is the commercial losses. So the city of Cedar Falls, we were right around $600,000. So I'll get into a little bit later, but a couple years ago, the as usually happens, the state of Iowa decided, you know what, we're done with the backfill. And so we'll now only pay about, we're going to phase the backfill out for the city of Cedar Falls. It'll be an 8-year phase out. So that means a loss of about $75,000 every year. One of the things that's interesting about that whole thing is the council at the time when this happened knew that the state legislature was probably going to, for lack of a better term, default on continuing to pay that. So they came up with a financial policy that essentially said, you know what, we're not going to count on getting the backfill every year. We're actually going to put that in a capital project. So that's going to be a policy we'll look at here in just a little bit. So this is going to be a little bit hard to see, so I apologize for that. But what we're looking at here is, this is FY23 and this is FY24. So this is what happened last year. So if you look, the rollback at that time was 54.13%. And then if you come down here, the tax rate is 11.51 that the city established during that time. So let's fast forward to FY24. So FY24 happened, and so we created, it was 1140 because your rollback changed slightly. It went from 54.13 to 54.65. And so what that did is we dropped the tax rate to 1140, and that got a 0% increase, which is $0 for a $100,000 residential home. Now, if you look, what happened is so the rollback slightly increased. So the property shift went to residential, and you can see here. So at a 0% increase for residential properties, it actually ended up with a just shy of a 1% decrease for commercial and industrial properties. So what that meant for the city is our FY23 property tax revenue was $23.8 million. We actually operated at a $100,000 loss at $23.7 million. So that's kind of moving from there. So if you look here, and again, here's we talked a little bit about this. Here's our FY24, FY25. So here's the thing that's going to get very difficult for a policy question. So increase on residential properties no more than the CPI. So so the CPI right now, the current CPI is 3.5%. So if you think about it, 3.5% on a residential home is really not a huge amount. But that's on a regular year when your rollback hasn't changed significantly. We have no idea. There's no common, hey, everybody's property in Cedar Falls went up 10%. Nope, we don't know that. Everybody's property went up a different percentage point. So it's going to be very interesting to get to a policy like this. If you look, this is a 15% decrease on residential if the tax remains the same. So let's move kind of right here, and we'll kind of explain this to you. So if we're looking at FY20, the rollback there is 54.65. If and again, this was last year's 1140 rate. So if nothing else changes, just nothing else changes, just the rollback rate. So we leave this at 1150. You can see it's a 15% decrease for homeowners, which would be a significant property tax decrease. What you'll see here in these in commercial and industrial, just because nothing else changed, the 1140, they're always at the 90%. So again, that's where the property tax shifts. So let me.
So Ron, you're assuming the $100,000 home stays at 100.
So in this one, I'll show you an example right here. So I moved ahead. So now here's what we did. We did a very similar calculation. So now the calculation is assuming that this $100,000 home received a 20% increase on their valuation this year. And so now the assessment value is 120. You keep that same, the same rate, the same rollback as we had on the previous slide. And what that really comes to is now you're looking at a 1.76% increase on that $100,000 home, which would be just under $11. What is that? $10.96. So now everybody's
40 went to 1096.
No.
So, no. So your 1140 is the same, but what they would actually pay is $10.96. Yeah,
Higher.
higher than.
Based on the extra $20,000.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so when do we typically find out the actual property assessment?
So Jen gets notified by the county. Typically it's the first week in January. She works with Tim Jameson. So again, this is going to be a challenging year for us, because not knowing, with the rollback dropping so much, and not knowing how each individual property owner is moving. Again, trying to keep this number at 3.5% may be easy, or it may be difficult. So that's going to be one of our biggest challenges to move forward. Not knowing, because the other part that the county is going to tell us is what is the growth here in the city. So, if everything stayed the same and it's stagnant, this is really the numbers you're going to deal with. But if we had a 5% overall valuation growth, where we had a number of new businesses, number of new homes, and all of those property taxes come online, you have growth, which offsets some of that other for the revenues as we move forward.
Ron, real quick housekeeping though. Commercial and industrial, are they controlled by two separate factors, or are they one and the same?
They're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Just for my OCD, we combine those into commercial and industrial and just put $1 million valuation on.
Yeah, we can do that.
And I think that's the state and the county have those separated out.
Right.
So.
And we technically wouldn't have multi-residential column anymore,
Yeah.
because there really is, multi-residential is the same as residential.
Same
So we,
residential next year? Or the year after?
for FY25, they're the same.
It's gone.
So we really could have two columns, residential and then commercial, industrial, yeah.
So, Ron?
Yes, sir.
Let me interject here a little bit. I had some research done. I got this sent to me from the Iowa Association of Realtors. In Blackhawk County, the median sales price from 2022 to 2023 went up 11.3%. That's a sales price, not necessarily assessed of everyone.
Sure.
It's median. The average sales went up 8.5%. Condos went up 57% of median, and the average was 18.6 condos.
So we kind of tried to ask the county, okay, do you guys have a general average percentage that you sent out? And they're reluctant to do that. And I get it, because, somebody may have a 32% raise in their evaluation. Somebody may have a negative. If you actually, in that time period, you had a $400,000 house, but you could only get $350,000 for it, that would drop. Now, those are going to be few and far between right now.
You also had bidding wars when people knew rates were rising. They were bidding like crazy and drove them up. I'm jumping over. That was October numbers I gave you. Year to date, it's actually flat. Median. Average sales price is up 6.5. So, moderate. So it's really flattened out with rates.
Yeah, I think
So,
interest rates and supply and demand and some of those things as well. So that's
Sounds like when we do our budget and the tax rate, we just need to know keeping the tax rate at what it is will actually cause a cut. And we just need to wait to see where all these numbers fall until we can really.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do is we go through these goal setting sessions. We take all the information that you guys want to include in the budget and include in the CIP, and then when we figure out what our revenues are, we try to figure out, okay, what's the tax rate, or what do we need to move to a different year to stay within all of these policies.
I think the key there is stay within the policies.
It is, but again, not knowing what this year's going to do, typically the financial policy is increase on residential properties no more than the CPI. Well, I can't confidently sit here and say right now that we can do that.
Right. Because.
But I can't confidently say that, oh, there's no way to do it. It's just, there's so many unknowns.
Right.
So this may be something, as we're working on it, that we have to come back to you this particular year. Personally, I think it's a great policy. In the past, it's worked very well. This has been a policy for a long, long time, probably 25 years that the city's had this. And they've talked about the CPI. But this is probably one of the biggest outlier years in this particular policy, so.
Would you speculate that it would come in over the 20%?
So, not over 20% for residential increases, but, there could be a scenario where, if it was a $100,000 house last year, and this year, because of their assessment and some of those, it could be 4% increase.
So the challenge still is just getting it down to that.
It's,
376 or 376.
yeah. So,
But also it'd be important to note, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if, let's say the valuation stayed the same, it would mean increasing the millage rate might still mean taxes stay at what they are because of the decrease in the rollback.
that's,
So
Yep.
while it might look like we're increasing the taxes by increasing the millage rate, we might really just be keeping it level.
well, and I think that's a really good point when you look and we go back from FY23 to FY24. It stayed the same. Everything stayed the same. There was 0% increase in taxes, but your millage rate actually dropped by 11 cents. So because of the growth in the community and some of those things, that's what offsets that.
Ron, did you say the rollback was 46.3? You got 54.65.
That's last
Yeah,
year.
so
That's
Sorry, I'm kind of scrolling between some of them, Daryl. This one's FY23, FY24. So this is actually so the rollback changed. But if I go to this one, is where we were trying to compare FY24.
Okay.
But are we there? Or is 26, 27, 28 gonna be 44, 42? Or we don't know.
The rollback is based on what the state of Iowa needs for revenue.
Well, they gave us some idea. I just was curious if they'd given us, or
Well, we
don't
knew
have that information.
we knew early that the rollback was dropping this year, but my understanding, Jen, is the rollback has also got some strange, goofy ag formula
Yeah.
in there as well.
Yeah,
that-
Ag land sales, yeah.
So,
But a good,
Dramatically,
yeah.
So our funding is coming from two
Yeah.
places.
so
I mean, it's just like I'll pick this year. We originally were hearing preliminary numbers of 49, 48, and then it came in at 46%. So yeah, to know what's the next few years, we don't know, Gil. I mean,
that seems to be a pretty dramatic drop in, where was that? I'm going the wrong way. Which way did I hand
you're
that?
sneaking ahead.
So, yeah. So let's go back to, there's the rollback. So as you can see, historically, since FY15, it stayed relatively right there. But this year, the bottom kind of dropped out of it.
But the key for our determination for fiscal year '25 is that revaluation from the county. And I understand that '26 is the up in the air thing with the legislature does, but, so we'll know in mid-January.
Yep,
if we
yep,
get lucky, right?
yep.
So my recommendation with this particular policy is that we so I can't do two things at once. If I fall down, I'll chew and bubble gum. I'll fall down. So I would recommend that we stay with this policy, keeping it in. But as the budget comes, we may have to come back and say, hey, we were able to keep that within the 3.5%, or here's why we couldn't. Or what do you want to cut to get it down to there? So.
I want to just kind of, and I'm not trying to throw shade, but we didn't follow policy last year. Is that correct? I'm just, not to put you on the spot, but we did not.
We did not follow
Because we
a lot of the
didn't.
policies, correct?
Yes, and so we set ourselves up for maybe a little bit of a, I just want to make sure we remember that. We didn't follow the policy last year, so that set us up for where we're at now.
You're saying we didn't take the increase with CPI last year?
We didn't.
Well, for this policy, in essence, we did, because we had a 0% and CPI a
So
year
we're
ago was
under it.
6.5%. So in terms of this particular policy, our residential increase was no more than the CPI. That's true. I think
Okay,
you're
right.
talking about some
But
of
we
the
did
other
not-
policies.
We did not raise like, we did not keep up with.
Correct, that is true, right,
Yeah.
correct.
I guess
But-
that's my.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit
Okay.
too, because you look at, again, we operated at a loss last year, $100,000 revenue loss. And then you start looking at some of the goods and services that cost us, that went up those, what was the CPI last year, 6.5?
I thought it was 6.5%, I thought, at
So-
the end of the year.
13 million total? Was it? What was the total number, the 100,000?
The 23 million, you have it right there on your
23
slide.
million, 100,000, 23 million is not,
Well, it's 100,000, 23 point.
Right.
When everything else, when all your other goods and services are going up
well, I
6.5.
understand that.
Yeah.
That's,
When Main Street was 9 million over budget, I mean, yeah.
so again, if people, if the council, elected officials are fine with staying with this policy as is, and we bring forward where we are at the end, so,
Yes.
during the budget process.
So this is A1 in the document?
Yep.
that we-
Yep, this is financial policy 8.1. All of those should be, can I borrow that real quick?
We also have it up
So-
on the screen.
Yeah.
So just
Yep.
wanna
So right
confirm-
here, most of the policies that we're going to be talking about specifically tonight are highlighted, and so we'll try to call those out as we move forward. So this is policy A1.
But at the same time, we don't have to increase it by the CPI.
No,
No.
So we were fine last year.
We were fine. I guess my point is the challenge this year, just not knowing.
Well, every year we say that.
Yeah, it's,
This is just a bigger one.
yeah, this is kind of a bigger unknown, it seems like. So,
But so right now, you're checking A1 to see if there's agreement as A1 is written right now.
Yes.
Can you see from everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, do we
Maybe
need the
if you could just
consensus
note
form?
that we did at least mention there might be a need to
we brought them.
review it.
Well, there'll be-
Yeah.
Right?
There's public hearings that we'll have to move through, and if we see any alarming things, we're gonna bring something up quickly. We'll get into the schedule a little bit later as well, where we are with the budget, and see where we're, because it is really gonna be a compact schedule that we're gonna have to have decision points, and so if we think we're nervous about some of those decision points, we'll talk about that as we go. So financial policy to develop the budget is to use the backfill for capital projects. So I talked a little bit about that a little bit earlier with regard to the backfill, and what the backfill was some additional funding from the state of Iowa because of the decrease in the rollback for commercial properties. And so as you look here, so we were generating right around 600,000 for the city. The state of Iowa gave us 600,000. The city council at the time said, you know what, we're not going to rely on this number. As you can see, it fluctuated a little bit here. I think it got down to 570 or something, and then back up to 600,000. But we're not going to rely on those monies. We're going to take those, set them aside. We're not going to put them in the budget, because during the legislative session, they could have just went away. So the policy is to put those into a capital fund that would fund one-time projects as we move forward. And there's a number of big projects that we were able to fund with that kind of helped. So again, the last year we'll receive funding will be FY29, and through that each year we're going to get about $75,000 less. So anyway, taking these monies and moving them into the that's the TIF. So moving them on, do we have that number, Jen, for this one?
Yeah, it's A3.
A3.
Financial policy A3.
Back to cycle.
So,
Yep.
so as
Those are
it's,
actual numbers, not projections.
yeah, these are,
They've stated this is what it will be until the phase out.
well,
Well, it's our
It's
amount
based-
divided by 8 years. So, I mean, it's basically we're losing 1/8 every year.
Yeah.
So this last year's.
Right, so, yeah, until 2030, we won't get anything.
Probably subject to state financing. Because right now we have a tremendous surplus. We're talking about phasing out income tax and next budget.
Sure.
So that could change, but.
well, I doubt the backfill's gonna change.
No.
They said it's going away.
It'd be nice if they
No, I mean-
it's more money. But yeah.
So are we all right keeping with that policy and,
So
oh,
the
sorry.
question on this is A3.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understand. So this backfill, we were just talking about the other backfill on residential property tax rates, and it can fluctuate.
This is the same. This,
Oh, roll back
well,
versus back.
there's a roll,
Okay.
yeah, rollback's the value of
Yeah.
what they're, and
So
the
this is going to go
backfill.
away in this metric.
Yep, the backfill is a check we get from the state of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And we stopped budgeting for it anyway, many years ago.
Yep, we stop.
And then when we get it, we use it for save it for a capital project.
So agreement on that?
I think the only flex I would want to mention is we talked a little bit last year about using excess capital for one-time projects or other things as designated. I would put in the same preclusion because it feels a little bit like we're sometimes storing up a little bit of money for whatever we want to designate it to just these one-time projects, but I want a little bit of flexibility in a year if we need it.
And I think you're talking about
I know.
just, no,
That's what
no,
we
I
did
just
last
meant, I just meant number 20. I think you're just
Yes.
saying using kind of that same wording as 20?
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yep.
So, yeah, and the council has that discretion every year because in the CIP, you'll see that this is one of the funding sources for some of the projects. If the council doesn't want to use that, then they don't have to.
Yeah, I think just giving ourselves options for A3 as well as what we did on A20
So are
would
you
be ideal.
proposing to change to A3, or is it just a note?
If agreeable to everybody, I would propose a change to match the wording.
I agree with that. So if I can just check
Basically, for the use of whether it's the backfill or the excess funds, use them for the same discretionary purposes later in the year.
It's essentially saying still for one-time use items, but just
Yeah.
kind of listing a larger set.
One has a larger, but I mean, I agree with you, but I also don't know that 20 necessarily would be considered an exhaustive list, right? Because there's general category descriptions of types of expenses. And I would just be 3 is more broad, I guess.
Yeah. The only thing, I guess, let's propose an actual worded change is just or other one-time allocations approved by the city council.
I think the only thing that I just might say about that could be a little different is, backfill, we pretty much know what that number is and we're gonna get. So when we plan on the CIP and using those numbers, we kind of know what that number is. We kind of know what we're gonna save up. The thing with the excess every year is we really don't know that until a year's over. So the description for the excess, I think, makes more sense because we get to an end of a year. Okay, we know this is how much excess we have. We also know what did our health insurance fund do? What did our economic development fund do? So I think having that discretion for multiple things makes sense for the excess. But maybe on the capital project and backfill, maybe not as much sense because we know the amount anyway.
No, I think what you're saying makes
Yeah.
sense, especially because it's in the CIP anyway.
Right.
So we don't need that much
So-
flexibility on it.
Maybe?
I retract that
Okay.
movement.
So it sounds like we have consensus? All right. So,
What if we say?
But this is making it clear.
Someone might have a bad wrist.
I can get the blocks.
Thanks for letting it be thumbed. The nights are late.
Let the record show Chris Latta raised a finger.
We did not specify which finger.
Let's remember those vision comments from the first night. We all want to be behaving.
That's right.
So as we move forward, again, the financial policies to develop the budget, what is to continue to transfer TIF release to economic development funds to cash flow the economic development projects. So what I have moving forward here, and we'll go through a number of these TIF things that we have. I know we've done it several times this year, but I think it's important that everybody at least tries to get a firm handle on where we are with our TIF districts in the community. So let me just kind of, when this financial policy was developed, really there was 2 reasons that the city council looked at this. And the first was, again, going back to the state legislature, TIF is always somewhat on the chopping block, whether it's, hey, we're going to axe it today, we're going to restrict it, we're going to do some of those things. By putting an economic development fund there, the city, if all of a sudden they they chop something off, we have funds that can help complete some of the projects that we may be in the middle of in those funds. The second one is, you often hear from other parts of the community that aren't in a TIF district, hey, how is that helping us? Well, these funds are unencumbered and can be used then in other parts of the community for economic development purposes, where maybe it's a smaller project and you don't necessarily want to establish an entire TIF district, but there may be a project or two that you want to help out. So those are really kind of the two major reasons that this financial policy was developed. So again, I think some of you have seen this a few times now, but we'll kind of run into it. So the city currently has, before I get too far into it, one of the handouts, there you guys go. So that's the TIF district map and the expiration on those potential TIF districts. So we currently have 5 active TIF districts: the College Hill, the Downtown, Pinnacle Prairie, Southern, Unified. So we had 2 others in the past that have expired. That was up in Foxview and North Cedar Falls, and that was a residential TIF, and then the Walmart TIF, when that first came, in order to establish Viking Road in front of it, was, but that has also expired. We're in the process of creating the Southwest District that's going to be there. We're also looking at the newly 75 acres that we've established out in that area. So again, let me just run through. Here's the downtown TIF district. This was established in '86. We have 2 TIF districts that do not have a sunset date. This and the College Hill. I think there's debate on a number of ways, but in these particular areas, it takes so much time to actually create a positive increment that I think it's really good that you don't have a sunset date. And typically, most of your infrastructure is very old in those areas that at one time was viewed as blighted. Over the years, we've had about 21.4 million in certified debt. We've received 18.3 of that. So right now, currently, there's a certified balance of about 3.1 million in that. But we also have in the CIP about $12 million of committed projects. So for instance, finish the streetscape, railroad spur, Main Street construction, so a number of those things. So there is still some debt that's outstanding. If we didn't, if we just had the 15.1 million, the 12 and the 3.1, it would take about 7.5 years to recoup our monies that we have in there right now. Now, one of the things I will tell you is right now the increment in this district's about 2.5 million. And for the past several years, maybe 5 years even, we've been releasing $500,000 of that back into the general fund. So 2 things. One, that's really good for the general fund. You're getting a third of that $500,000 back into the general fund, but it's also taking longer to recoup some of this. So
A third of $500,000, or you're getting $500,000?
So if we release a $500,000 evaluation,
It's
we're
a
only
third
getting
of
the city's third into the.
Do we have these slides, or will have them?
Yes, it's part of the packet. You could have downloaded the.
Yeah, it was on the website yesterday, Gil. You should have got the email that you could have followed the link, kind of like the council packet works. Yep.
I followed the link and it just took me to,
Oh,
didn't take me there.
oh, okay.
So,
Just to double check then on that 500,000 released back to the general fund, is that deviating from A2 in a little sense? Or here it says continue to transfer those released funds into economic development fund, but we're sending a big G.
So I think A2 is a little bit different. Established the A2 is really a TIF release for the economic development. So if a TIF district expires and those dollars then are released, what we do is take the city's portion. This policy directs to take the city's portion and apply it to the economic development fund.
after it.
But I think to your
expires.
point, Dustin, maybe we should clarify it saying, continue to transfer TIF release from expired districts.
Yeah.
Is that maybe what you're proposing,
Yeah.
Dustin?
I'm not 100% settled on this idea, but I'm just thinking it out loud that on expired released, I'd like that to go back into the general fund.
Sure.
On the releases, we're talking about downtown, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't deviating from this policy. So. Thoughts from others on that?
So I would say, my thought is, I think this will be more once we talk about the priorities and things the rest couple of sessions, because I do want to look at how are we funding our economic development. Because I think as long as we're making sure to fund economic development, whether it's coming from this or general budget, but
And those expired releases are useful for economic development anywhere in the city. They're not locked to that TIF district for
Correct.
which
Correct.
they expired. So, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not overbalancing towards one or the other. So some sustainability of how we use these funds is probably important. But no changes this time.
So I'll just keep moving through these.
Ron, is this the
Yes.
time to confirm A2?
So I'd like to get through all of the
Yeah.
TIF stuff before we do that. So as we talk, this is a College Hill TIF district. So established in 2011, so it's quite a bit less mature than the downtown TIF district. We've had about 928,000 in certified debt in this area, and we've received about 375,000 of that. The balance being 553,000. But here's what I'll say is a lot of this balance right now is from the recent projects that's been out there. The park area, what's the creek, the box culvert, the Pedersen Plaza, that's what I was looking for. I kept wanting to say plaza, but the Pedersen part was escaping me. So anyway, so there's about 3.7 million committed on in the CIP, which is finish the box culvert and West 22nd Street are some of the things that we have moving forward. So there is another just slight policy decision that I skipped on College Hill and the downtown TIF. So one of the things with the TIF is there's qualified SMID dollars that are actually collected in the TIF. What the city, in the policy that we've done in the past and have always said is we are going to return those dollars to the SMID, to College Hill and to Community Main Street. So if the council is all right with that, we will continue that practice. And I don't know what.
No, sorry, I forgot to put the number on that one, Amy. It's 18. It's number 18. I don't think I highlighted it either, but it's actually A18.
So does that make sense what I said there? So I apologize for that, but really, so as we collect TIF dollars, there's a portion of those TIF dollars that take the SMID. So if we just allocated those towards the project, those dollars, they wouldn't go to Community Main Street, they wouldn't go to College Hill. The policy has always been is, hey, we've collected those, but we are going to return them to those organizations to help out with their operating expenses and all of those things.
Okay, so doing a check right now on A18 as it's written.
They wouldn't get any funds from that SMID assessment without us giving it back to them?
They would get some. They would get some.
Yeah, I thought they would get it themselves from the SMIDs that they're imposing upon their
No.
businesses.
So actually, this is my word, seeing the card players earlier, TIF trumps SMID. So even though they self-assess themselves in SMID, since we have a TIF district that overlaps the same, TIF trumps SMID. So they don't get to get that self-assessed amount unless we do this policy.
But our policy's always been to return those dollars to those organizations.
Yeah.
As if the SMID wasn't within.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Gil and
So,
Dustin?
yeah, okay. So, we are gonna look at every one of these or just the highlighted ones, because that one wasn't highlighted?
Yeah, I forgot. That was my
I'm
apologies.
sorry.
I forgot to
All right.
I forgot to do that. That's my apologies.
Feels like the clock already.
Yeah.
So,
We're not getting out early tonight.
Some of them were highlighted in there too.
well, I would say especially for this year, because I'm guessing they budget on those, so
Mm-hmm.
we
So we
need
have a
that
yes on that?
conversation about this.
You're talking about 18.
Yeah.
This, just to check quick, does anybody, especially since we've got a lot of new people, need an overview of TIF or just a high level how it works, or is everyone comfortable with what?
That's a multi-year facet.
I'll say, why not?
Let's just talk about it every year.
I am expected home tonight.
I just happened to come with a prepared presentation.
If you have any questions, we have several presentations from the past year you can refer to on the city website.
We could do about 3 or 4 special sessions on that.
Yeah.
So here's another one of our TIF districts, Pinnacle Prairie. This was established in 2006. Economic development area that it was established as. Its 20-year expiration is 6/30/31. Part of the reason for that is because we didn't actually certify the debt until, what was it, 2011? Certify the debt until 2010. So this expiration date's in 31. We have, so there's been 2.7 million in certified debt. We've received 2.6 million in TIF revenues. Its payback is, we've got less than $100,000, I think, right now, but there is 4 million as we look at Prairie Parkway and that project that's going to be happening down there. So, again, just this is, I'm guessing, we don't know because there's been quite a bit of growth in this TIF district. And the last time we received revenues was about 67,000, but we're anticipating that this is about $1 million increment in there for each year. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later is there are some developers in this area that have some requests to the council with regard to some TIF dollars, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Here we are with the South Cedar Falls TIF district. As you can kind of see the boundaries there with Highway 20, Hudson Road, Ridgeway Avenue, kind of going right through the center of it. This was established in 2018, designated as a economic development. There's a 20-year expiration date on it. There's been 1.2 million in certified debt. We've received 900,000 of that, and the payback, we got about 300,000 still standing. There's 15.4 million in committed projects for this Gibson property development. So for those of you that don't know, this the city of Cedar Falls owns this parcel right here, which is about 70 to 80 acres, and this, I think it's 150 acres total, and the city also owns this parcel right here that we're looking at developing as we move forward. Any questions on the...
So right where your cursor is that the old home park?
This right here, that's correct.
Okay.
So right here is the mobile home park. Here is the new Holiday Inn that's out there. I believe this is Public Works. So,
Put your cursor again where you said wheel on the line. Sorry.
so city owns this parcel, which is about 80 acres, and I think this parcel, which is about 70 acres.
Which one's the Gibson property?
But, well, the reason we call them the Gibson property,
So
both of them,
those.
is we purchased those from the Gibson, I think it was called the Gibson six children that were the heirs of that property. So, and we are seeing, we are getting some interest from some folks on these two parcels right now. So there may be some economic development conversations that we have with you coming up in the future. Unified district. If you look actually on your map, it's the green parcel that runs down through there. This is really designated as economic development. This was that 1990 era TIF district, which means there was no original expiration date on it. Now there's been different phases of it, so there is 20-year expiration dates on different pieces of it. So there's over the years, it's been $120 million in certified debt. We've received $93 million back of that to the payback. There's a balance of $27 million still outstanding, And if you, there's about $30 million in projects that we're looking at moving forward in the CIP. Land acquisition, Highway 58, Viking Road, construction.
How much do we currently receive each year?
So it varies with what that is. I am not sure what that, do
Should
you
have,
that one?
yeah, you got it right there, Ron.
So
Or one of your
that
pages.
annual revenue, it looks like it's about 3.4 million in that district. Again, there's multiple in this area, and dates. What else do we need to tell you about? So the original area in 2023 was about 2.4 million. Amendment 1 of that is now an expired area, and I've got let me put my finger up here. I think if you actually look on the map, you can see what that expired is. So this policy right now, that expired, and do we have those dollars, Jen?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah. Oh, what the dollars were?
Yeah, so it ended up being a significant
Right here.
amount
So it's
that
on
went
the
past.
slide coming up about, released
Oh,
about
yeah,
3.5
yeah.
million in revenue.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit there. So again, there's the originals that have expired, those two TIF districts as we move forward. There's kind of a close-up of the expired areas. Let me back up here. So the expired area, there was a release of about 3.5 million that went to all three of the separate entities. Our portion of those dollars, actually ended up going, the city's portion 1.3 million. So that has been going into the Economic Development Fund. The schools ended up with about 1.3 million, and the county 900,000. This is kind of interesting. If you look on your map, this would be the next one to the west of the expired district. This is going to be expiring in FY25. We've been talking to our bond council about, okay, if this thing expires and we have a number of undeveloped properties in there, can we actually let it expire, those monies go in, and then we also re-enter these properties so we can still gain that value. And so that's, if the council's all right with that, we're going to be working on that and bringing back a proposal.
We could do that.
What's that?
Their feedback was that yes.
Yes, so we typically use, what's his name, out of Allers in Des Moines?
Oh, Nathan?
Nathan. So down there, and so yeah, he's very familiar with all the TIF and bonding laws, and so we'll come back with that. At the same time, that cursor doesn't show up very well on there. So we purchased this property, and we're in midst of development. This was a property, 75 acres, that we just recently purchased last year. We'll be working on actually annexing this property into the city and platting and all of those things that go along with that. As most of our existing council members know, this is the Shoemaker property, and Velma unfortunately has now passed away. I think she was well in her hundreds when she passed away, but so we're working with her heirs to see what they may want to do with that property as well. Again, here's the numbers that I was actually searching for with, the city has about 1.3 million that's released, the schools and the county, that was in, so the council decides each year how the city's TIF release will be used, and the financial policies reviewed each year. So again, going back to that, that financial policy was instead of
A2.
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 So continue to transfer TIF release to the Economic Development Fund, cash flow economic development projects.
Which one is that? Can we make that word change to expired? TIF?
Oh,
Or
right.
released expired TIFs?
Is everybody all right with the word change of expired TIF?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really seems to happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
moving on with the financial policy decisions to develop budget, general fund cash reserves. So the policy that we have is maintain 20%. Usually 15 to 20% is what's in, not usually, what's in the actual resolution is 15 to 25% in the resolution. Currently, our cash reserves are just shy of 21% of the overall budget. So again, great policy moving forward, and I think we should.
So I think that's C1, Amy.
Only
Sorry, which
because
one was it?
C1. It's a kind of a little chart. It's a little table in there.
It is.
I've been in too many nonprofit budgeting
Yep.
conversations lately. Do we put those in CDs, hold those in?
Oh yeah, there's.
Yep, so like just for information, Danny, so Lisa, actually who's here, every month she sends out a bid sheet to all the financial institutions, and we kind of ladder our certificates or deposit, or we actually go through, like iPay is, like actually they were their winning bid, I think. Lisa will confirm that if that was their winning bid this month actually, but, so yeah, so that's how we invest those.
So the next policy there is emergency reserve fund, maintain at 1.5 to 2 million. So let me just give a little bit of background on how this has been established over the years. So what's happened is 2008 flood, 2016 flood. When the city actually went in and started doing whether it was flood protection or flood recovery efforts, and we receive a number of those dollars, a percentage of those dollars we'll get back from FEMA. But you're probably looking at about a year before you see any of those monies back. So what happened in 2008 is we were able to follow up and receive those monies, but it was into a whole different fiscal year. So what the city departments did is they were able to absorb or use their budgets those years and absorb those money or absorb those expenses. Now, having said that, we had a number of budget amendments and some of those things, but so you end up in the next fiscal year and you start receiving these monies. So over the years we've just set them aside for it used to be called a flood protection and recovery account, and then the name changed to flood reserves, and then a couple of years ago the council decided, well, it shouldn't just be flood, it should be any type of emergency. So we've now the fund name is emergency reserve fund. So every year it seems like we have a discussion on where those funding amounts should be and how much. Staff came up with a recommendation of somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million, and the reason we came up with that recommendation is in 2016 after the flood, we figure we spent somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million dollars before we had anything reimbursed to us. So that was just kind of a solid number. I think over the years we've had this is a shortened list, but right now under this, because we've spent down some of this using it for the Center Street project and also the River project, the council's allocated those dollars. So if you look, the River project, there's 1.7 of it, but cash on hand right now is 3.7, and so that gets us to the balance of where the council wanted us to be. It was the policy is maintained at 1.5 to 2 million, but the council provided the direction they'd like that to be closer to 2 million. So right now that fund, the emergency reserve fund, is at $2 million. Cash on hand is a little bit more than that, but those dollars are allocated.
What are $2,008 compared to $2,025? Does it make sense to reserve up to 2.5?
It could. I would say now, since we've spent it down, it's really going to be what is going to be the next thing that happens to reimburse us or to get, to put those funds in unless we want to actually budget for increasing that to $500,000.
Would it be fair to say, if we had a flood today, that we wouldn't have as much costs and damage as we had back then because of the things we've done
Yeah, that's
since.
Sure.
gonna be
Yeah.
what I was gonna
So,
ask. Is
so
there-
knock
what's our
on,
risk?
knock on wood, knock on wood, it depends on the size of the flood. Obviously, if we have the 2008 level flood, the downtown here is now protected because of the elevated, but if you get anything that comes over the levee, we're in a lot of trouble. And that's because CFU, the wastewater treatment plant, all of those things. Most of the neighborhoods on the north side of the river have been purchased or bought out. There's still some of those, there will be some damage, but I don't know that the exposure is there unless we exceed a 2008 flood.
So probably the better point then is just that there shouldn't be any more money coming out of this fund, so it maintains it that too, because there's nothing else going into it.
That's going to maintain at that, and I think if we also go way back to when we talked about the bonding, so reserving that 25 to 30% of our bonding capacity, because if we get hit, we're talking about a flood right now. What happens if we're Parkersburg and we get hit with we're going to be using that bonding capacity for emergency, and we will, but at when?
In the short term.
Yeah.
Plus, we would have lost valuation. We would have lost houses that had valuation, so.
I just was pointing out that 1.5 million in 2008 does not equate to 1.5 million today.
Not even close.
So if we had an F2 that came through, which, it's not, but would it make sense to try and set aside something to increase that? Because
So-
your bonding is going to take a time too to get funds for that recovery.
So if we had additional monies that came through, and sometimes they'll come through in the form of ARPA or some of those, we can always bring that to the council and ask, hey, where would you like this? Would you like this into the emergency reserve or something else
I'd rather
at
do
that
that.
time?
Yeah, I don't disagree with your point, I just
Leave the
think.
minimum.
We did have
Budget
monies,
for it.
yeah, during the pandemic.
Yeah, we had some
money.
COVID dollars that I think we brought to council
You,
and,
you never know where some of the funding sources will be
Right.
at those times, so,
Usually from something bad,
yes, unfortunately.
yeah.
So we need to check both, so let's check both of these. Good?
Yeah, yes.
Daryl?
Yeah.
Okay, we need a break.
I didn't know, I just saw some people getting out
Yeah.
and.
You do as needed.
Just do it quick.
Just a quick break, just even for
Seven.
a minute.
5:30.
An even number, because then people don't follow. Well, I mean, a common increment. So much shade being thrown at you. You know what? I'm just gonna go sit in the car. As a business econ, it's not a full econ. I took the light econ, less statistics.
I tell you what, I could not get out of those classes fast enough.
You don't like them?
No. One was better than the other. Macro, yeah, one of them was better than the other. I didn't like either one. Yeah.
I was the one that I was the one actually interested.
Yeah.
They all asked me.
Are you an economics major? Financing?
They go hand in hand. And you get the crystal ball to the
Ron, do you need a water?
No, I'm good, thank you.
It's good to have friends.
So, sorry this is so tough.
It's actually not. I'm interested in this stuff.
I thought I was going to be falling asleep, but I feel engaged.
Good, because the next slide has to do with calisthenics.
Good. We should probably
Jumping jacks, running
we
plays.
should probably have budgeted for a yoga person to come in. Daryl, do you ever do yoga or
Massage therapist.
any of the?
General fund savings.
Up and down tractors and.
It's actually a really good movement.
Well, I do a lot of this for some reason.
You're supposed to bend at the knees.
Oh, that too. I get down there and I'll just get and I pivot and then I stand up. It's a big one. And then I always lift too much because I'm not 21.
You know,
Yep, getting down is a lot easier than getting up.
well, do you guys know Rich Collins?
Yes.
Actually, what always seems to do these.
He helped out putting up yard signs, like big ones. Yeah. And I felt that 'cause he came out, you know, hot. What month was that? August day. Put him out. He's 70s. And but we got to one point where he kept like every sign I'm like, should I keep going or? But he's like, nope, good to go. And we had put out, I think, probably close to 50 of them. And then the last one, he had taken down. There's a recording right here. And then he needed help getting all that.
Oh, is that fine? Just so they're jumping in. Okay.
No, I think it's going well.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is he said everything's fine, just he doesn't quite have the legs that went down that long. Just get down.
My knee meniscus is rusted on and they say it's not gone enough.
So say this and like, so what do I need to go do to make it go?
Ron, I hear you're meeting with Ryan Meyer tomorrow morning before he heads to Indianapolis.
Is that oh, he's going over?
They
Fractured
one of the girls got a sprinter made to drive him over there.
Nice.
They're coming back Saturday night. Back on Sunday morning. And then going up to Green Bay.
I'm in that dangerous stage.
Oh, that's a nice trip.
That's a good weekend.
Where you need to stretch and I'm just waiting for the day.
Yeah, that's a great trip. So uh-oh. Maybe Santa's going to drop off some money.
I haven't been a good enough boy.
I'm just waiting to see if my kids drop me off somewhere. They're coming down. They're coming down.
Yes, sir. So I'd say we're probably 80% done with the grant application right now, but it's not available to apply. So it's not quite available to apply. There's a thing that they call NOFO, which is notice of funding.
Like my main diet.
There we go.
Yep. So we got several meetings right Yeah, it's pretty funny.
On Rag Ride, they used to throw carpets over. You get anywhere close to wheel cams.
One thing we do, there's no current.
I was trying to ask you.
Right. It's usually.
Yeah, there's.
Because those letters came out last March. I mean, people aren't.
But it's funny they took her out.
But, because I'm pretty sure it's not letters went out. But we didn't.
All right, should we jump back in?
Everything in it.
Aaron goes, we're a third of the way through the slides.
That's a good one to start
So if everybody's ready, I'll just kind of jump right back into it. So, so right now, this is a financial policy to develop the budget, and then talks about the use of general fund savings. So this is, so Jen kind of helped me explain this. We moved the goal from 3A8 to the financial policy A20. Same wording, just moved it into the financial policies. So it's, the policy is to deposit funds in excess of annual operation expenses in capital reserve account for projects, economic development, public land acquisition, redevelopment, health insurance, and health insurance fund support, or other one-time allocations approved by the council. I believe that was the addition we had from last year. So I would tell you most of our departments, our departments are very good about managing their budgets. Very typically, they turn back dollars. But what I would tell you is the majority of the dollars that come back are from positions that become vacant throughout the year, and then they're vacant for 3 to 6 months or however long it takes to fill them. Or in some cases, it takes longer. We're looking at one in wastewater that took us about 9 months to fill. So anyways, so typically what we'll do with those dollars is we bring them back. You see them as a resolution throughout the course of a year, and I think last year the resolution had public safety. No, that wasn't. So we had the health fund, insurance. What else did we have last year?
Well, and then it's the ones, the pickleball pool and river, and the resolution.
Pickleball pool, river
mentioned those.
project, and so yeah, the public safety center was an earlier one. But anyway, those are when we take those one-time savings, and it's very difficult to anticipate what that's going to be for the budget. So, and you don't want to try to under budget your staffing or some of those things, because now all of a sudden you're over budget, and that is not good either. So, is everyone all right with the policy, which is now financial policy A20?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about our health insurance fund. So our health insurance fund has taken some hits here over the past few years. So as you can see, let me back up a little bit, and Jen's going to have to jump in a little bit. But so we're a self-insured entity. The city is self-insured for health insurance, except you hit to a certain point and our insurance actually kicks in. Well, so what's happened over the past years is we've had some bigger losses, especially 1.3, almost 1.2 million in some of those losses. So our transfer after 23 was really, we were down to about 800,000. End of year resolution, some dollars that were already budgeted, got us back to that $3.1 million. And so what we're looking at is continuing that, and this our budget number for this financial is A16. The policy question really is continue to use general fund excess at the end of to help support the health insurance fund and budget for more city contributions right away in FY25 budget. So looking just to keep that a solvent account as we move forward.
This might be just showing my ignorance, but when you say loss, are you really talking about a draw on the fund?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's,
Yep.
So Ron, we need to talk about raising premiums.
So that is one of the things that we've talked about for a number of years, and we've started conversations. So there's some challenges with that that's in the collective bargaining agreements. So we'll have, I forget what the year is, but we can start looking at that. The other thing that gets really challenging right now is how much are we going to start to change those with how difficult it is to recruit employees right now. So, that's one of the one of the few benefits that employees see as a municipal worker.
How do
That
you compare with other cities that have
what
self-funded?
what our HR folks will tell you is when you start looking at what we pay and what we're doing. I would say municipalities were probably all pretty much on a level playing field. We're way ahead of like where the schools are, but what's happened is the private sector's caught up now. The private sector is now starting to catch up with where we are with benefits as well. So
the question is A16.
A16, that's correct. And again, any of these come back to you in the form of some type of a policy or resolution as those excess dollars would come forward.
Around the 3.1 million is a target?
That's what we have right now.
That's what the account balance is. Well, that's
as of June.
As of June 30th, whatever the draw was since then, so it could be less.
Because, so you'll see, like, for those past handful of years, what the draw on the fund has been, but then in FY22, at the end of the year, we use some of the excess to help the health insurance fund, and then in FY23, same thing, we came back to council with that resolution, and we also transferred another 1.2 million in there. So right now, we're at 3 million. Now, 3 million sounds like a lot, we understand that, but when you look at fiscal year 22 and 23, basically that would have just been gone. I mean, if we have 2 more years like that, it's going to be gone.
You funded it with an excess 2.4 million in those three resolutions.
So in 22 we did 900,000. In 23 we had already budgeted to do 300,000, and then the excess in the resolution that came for you after the year was over in September, we transferred an additional 1.2. So really in FY23 we did 1.5 million in that year.
And the 1.2 came from the general fund savings.
Right.
Is there any concern that if we have a couple of years where we don't have a budget surplus, we don't have the money to backfill
Right.
this? And
Yes, there's always that.
So I think
That's why part of this says and budget for city contributions right away in FY25.
Which line are we talking?
A16.
so. I just want to clarify. So the part about and budget for it isn't in A16. A16 is just really kind of a generic about self-insurance fund. I think for you, Ron, I just had in about the policy question, I think really is for this group, just as we're working on the budget, do we want to also just budget more for health insurance, just so we don't have to use all of our excess
Sounds to me
either?
like you need to have both.
Well,
Yeah, we probably do.
For the emergency fund, we would say we want to have $1.52 million
Yeah.
in there. Shouldn't we have a similar concern or target
Yeah.
for how we maintain the
Yeah.
balance?
I think, yeah.
Just to your point, you don't know that you're gonna have.
Yeah, quick question too. I mean, approve this, maintain it for now, but can we also put in some research? I know that could be
Sure.
a
Yeah.
goal of some kind, but some research as to compare, not taking away any benefits, but looking into a group bargaining with an entity that we could fund through for similar or better costs.
Sure.
Is there a huge advantage to being self-insured?
Well, I think what the advantage is, of course, is in theory, you don't have the profit margin. If we just go with health insurance and have to pay premiums, they're factoring in also in that premium a profit margin. So in theory, self-insured should be cheaper, but it also means you do have to maintain reserves to do that. And then of course we do have insurance over an individual amount. If they get over a certain stop loss amount, we do that. But
as a self-insured, it just seems to me we should be a little better informed of what our risks are on an annual basis to
Sure.
see how much we should maintain that.
Do we have current ceilings within those that would be out
That's
here
the
so we
stop
could
loss.
encourage?
Right, the stop loss.
so we do have stop loss, and Paul can probably, we've actually raised that. We used to be that a specific stop loss was 85,000. So if an employee got 85,000, we had reinsurance over that. We've actually had to increase that because our stop loss premiums have gone up so much. Because of large claims, the other thing you see is now our stop loss premium, I think in 1 year went up like $300,000 or $250,000, something like that, because we had such large claims. So you get kind of a double whammy on that. So we try to raise that spec up to like 100,000 or 110,000 to try to help offset the
balance
premium
it.
cost a little bit, but we're also taking on more risk by doing that.
It's like any insurance, the more you
Right.
pay, the harder it is to get.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and we know we're never gonna go down, once we've raised that spec limit up, we're never gonna go back down to 85,000, so, it is a challenge, I think, just like Ron said, we also understand, we have been tied a little bit with bargaining, but beyond bargaining, it is tough right now when you're trying to compete with the private sector about getting employees and retaining employees. One thing we have right now is to be able to tell people, okay, we might be paying you a little bit less, but you're also only paying $100 a month for family health insurance. And so it is one thing that we have as a benefit. Now, we know that that's really low. And I know Daryl asked about how do we compare to other cities. I mean,
Is that the actual number?
yeah.
That's great.
So, yeah. So I think that's what our challenge is I think we all get that employees, by taking more on, they have more, what do I want to say, more stake in the game, so to speak, and more, careful about what they're using. But we also understand that in bargaining in Chapter 20 Iowa Code is when you increase someone's health insurance premium, the very first thing they ask for then is a wage increase to cover.
To offset.
To offset it. So you didn't gain anything. We're just maybe getting more in our health insurance fund, but now we're having to spend more out of the general fund in wages. I mean, that's just how Chapter 20 bargaining works.
And if you actually sit down and do the math, it's not really, you're not gaining by the premiums,
Right.
it's the plan design
Right.
is
Yep.
what we have to look at as we
Yep.
move forward. And coming up with potentially some tiered plans.
Mm-hmm.
Is the age of our employees in general higher? Because there was quite an increase from 2020. The trend is there as we have a number of major claims.
I don't think it's increased that much because we do have a lot of young employees when you think about it, especially if you look at our public safety department. We have a lot of young employees, so I wouldn't say our average age has gone up that
Young employees
much.
can sometimes be more expensive because they start to have children and
Blame the millennials.
So,
The cost
But
is,
it's-
healthcare is definitely not
Yeah.
going
It-
down.
Right.
And I don't think you can't really point to a demographic.
yeah. And actually, that's why you'll see in the next couple council meetings, you'll actually see some items about prescription plans, because that's one of the ways we're trying to see, can we kind of revamp our prescription plan a little bit, to try to help offset some costs too. So you'll actually see that coming up here on
So I was
council
going to
meetings.
ask, do you know how much of that increase is just based on increasing expenses in healthcare, and how much of that's an increase in usage of insurance?
We might have that. I'm not. I mean, I don't off the top of my head, but we may have some of those reports that we might know that. How much was claim? I get what you're asking. I can look to see what we have. Individual, yeah, like, who's our large claims and all that. Actually, I don't even see that either. I mean, we just see that
Yeah,
we had like
just
5 large
whole.
claims over this amount.
Yeah.
So.
Okay,
Okay.
back to A16 then.
All right.
Do we need to look, to Aaron's point, do we need to look at a policy where we have a minimum or whatever, like we do with the emergency fund, or not, like?
I was thinking,
What I'd like to do is have our staff do a little bit of research and maybe come back with a recommendation of what that dollar figure should be.
I was
Because it
just
seems
thinking
like
about
we're comfortable.
actuarial sciences, you try to do a risk assessment, and then what level of funding
Right.
should we have?
it seems like we're comfortable this year.
We had talked about wanting to know like kind of where we stood in the market of hires and employment and all that, so maybe it would just make sense to do all of that together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all part of the same picture.
So the next financial policy is the escrow account or internal service funds. So the city will continue to fully fund liabilities and escrow accounts. These include our severance, payroll, 27th payroll, liability insurance. And all of these are internal liabilities that we continue to pay for. So I think it was. What is it, 10 or 11 years that we end up with a 27 pay period. Well, what we try to do is budget for that throughout that whole 10 or 11 years, so there's a liability, so all of a sudden you don't have a giant property tax hike during that particular year. So that's financial policy A7C. So this is continue to access our user fees for specific city services, rates approved by, are always approved by the council, but we want to build capital projects when establishing these fees. So for instance, we're always trying to look at that sanitary sewer fee as we move forward with being able to pay those bonds back with sewer revenues, any type of improvements that we make with refuse as well, stormwater, those rates. So we try to do that every 3 to 5 years. It's probably a little bit more often right now with our sanitary sewer, but don't we have some of those rate studies coming up in the near future?
Yeah, I want to say we just did them 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I want to say, and I thought we did them for
5
5-year
years.
periods, I thought. So, yeah, that'll be coming up.
So is everybody good with this?
A8.
A8, correct. So the Health Trust Fund shall only budget the expenditure of the interest income generated by the fund minus an interest income contribution into the fund's principal. Equal, I don't want to just keep reading this, but so maybe I should back up here a little bit and ask if everybody understands what the Health Trust Fund is. So
The money from the sale of the municipal hospital back in the day.
yes,
Can
and
you
so
maybe just clarify whether the intended use is?
so the intended use, just plain and simple, was always to keep a hospital in Cedar Falls. And so as we move forward on that, and so originally it was established in '97, and there was approximately $8 million was put into the fund back then, and has grown to about $19 million with rental payments and some of those things. So there's a health trust board that actually looks at different projects that are submitted, and they use the interest off that, none of the principal, to award certain grants. It's been a little bit more difficult moving forward because the state auditor has now said, hey, you have to actually tie this to economic development funds or some of those type of things that we actually have to look at. So some projects don't necessarily always get funded, some do. So, but anyway, this is.
Ron, you mean the distributions have to be tied to economic development?
So state auditor came out with an opinion, actually kind of two different ones. They had one and then they did it
Revamped
kind of
it.
a revised one. But basically it's talking about when you're going to fund, if you're going to use tax dollars, governmental funds to fund nonprofits or private entities, what is the use that you're justifying using
What's the
those
public
funds?
purpose?
Economic development is one of those funds or uses that would be, but it's also about the public purpose and some of that. So I think it was a year ago we revamped our application form to kind of make sure they kind of clarify that in their application too. Like how can they justify that this, may be tied to a service or economic development or however it is, to kind of help us justify those to stay within that opinion of the state auditors. So, yeah.
Let me give you a little bit more background on the Health Trust Fund. So back a number of years ago, and the Sartori at the time, now Mercy One, came to us and said, hey, we're looking at building a new hospital, and so we negotiated an economic development agreement in order to keep them here and using some of these dollars that were in there. So as many of you know, the ownership at that time then decided to sell, and there's the whole big backstory on leadership and some of that. So we have a development agreement that we worked out with Mercy One about moving and using some of those, but maintaining, keeping a number of this, the health trust. So we'll be looking at as they move forward, or if they move forward, looking at that development agreement continues. So.
19 million go towards help building the hospital? Or-
Well, so what we've always said is there's a big portion of that principle that we're going to have to keep if the existing hospital stays, which the city owns. there's going to have to be a bunch of work, whether it's tearing it down or getting the site ready for redevelopment. And there was 2 or 3 other things. And Jen and I were just talking, and we couldn't quite remember all of them, but that those monies would be for. The other thing that's in the Health Trust Fund is we have some farms that are outside of town, and we use that, and 2/3 of the farm ground is leased out every year. 1/3 is we use for our the disposal of our wastewater treatment things. So that farm that's in the lease would actually come back to the city as well in the development agreement that we had drafted. So.
Ron, is he on the office building attached to that hospital as well?
So we own the ground. I think that was purchased by, that was built by Mercy One. So again, going back to the financial policy A10 with regard to the Health Trust Fund.
Okay.
So here's a 411 pension. So Jen's going to have to help me out with this because when the funding started, so 411 pension. So if some of you know, some of you don't, this is the pension system that covers police and fire. Most other city employees are under the IPERS pension system, but police and fire is covered under this. And so back when the state established this in the 90s, Cedar Falls was holding some reserves, and that came out of the pension fund that they had at the time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so those monies have been set aside then, and the principal is not touched. What happens every year is we take the interest that comes off of that money, and that interest goes to help pay the pension cost for 411. So if you look at in 1997, the bottom thing there, all the interest was able to go ahead and pay for the pension funds. But if you look in 2024, it also needed $1.1 million in property tax support over that. So that's how much the pension system's grown. Now, could we use the principal to go ahead and buy that down? Yes, but when that's gone, it's gone. So the long-standing policy has been to use that interest to cover those, to help support or cover those costs for a 411 pension.
Which is A11.
A11. So. There's so many of these, I forget what they are sometimes. So municipal. So maintain capital and maintenance reserve accounts generated from user fees set aside to pay for future capital repairs or facility replacement. Some of the examples that we have is in the rec center, aquatic center, Hearst Center. So financial policy A14, and so if you look at what some of those are, is the Hearst sets aside like 15% of registrations to help with cost of the Hearst, and 10% of the rental, gift shop, and artwork. The rec and aquatic center sets about 13% of that to make improvements to those facilities. So again, as you look at those policies, they're also aimed at maintaining and improving the facilities as we move forward.
So, Ron, if I can just jump in, just so everyone's benefit, from the CIP, you will see some of those funds. Like if you see, like it say rec CIP, that's these funds we're talking about. That's how those are generated. Every user fee, we take off a percentage, then we can use them for capital projects. So it may be cultural improvement fund, golf improvement fund. You'll see those on the CIP.
How's the percentage determined?
Just kind of what we felt was the right number. No perfect magic formula, there isn't, no. And it's actually gone up at one point. Yeah, I mean, I would say 20 years ago, that was maybe 7%. And we felt, we know capital costs are gonna be more.
Right.
And so we felt we needed to set aside more, so.
Okay.
So A14?
Yes.
Okay.
She just had to
CFU transfer. So some of you know about this, some of you don't know about this. The CFU transfer is made in what they call the pilot, which is called property in lieu of taxes. So since CFU is a municipally owned utility, they don't pay property taxes. But what's a common practice throughout the industry, whether it's all throughout the country, municipally owned utilities typically pay what they call a pilot, is property taxes in lieu, or property and payment in lieu of taxes. So, and those go to our general fund to offset the cost of supplying services. You know, who is probably the biggest user of our right-of-ways would be CFU, and some of the maintenance and some of those things. So those transfer funds are to be set aside in a capital account to finance various one-time capital projects. So yeah, that's A15.
So, real quick question, when we had that big overage because the gas got so god awful high a couple years back, and we talked about the pilot coming back. We couldn't have used any of that to offset residential utility bill payments because of this designation that it needed to be for capital projects. Is there any reason to make that more flexible?
Well, you as a council still, these are policies that we're going to use moving forward. You as a council still have the potential to override those councils in a situation that would come up. So if, for instance, there was some reason that you wanted to vary from that for a 1-year time period, or some other time for good reason, you can always do that.
Because when they transfer the funds, a resolution does come through council on those. I think that's probably when that conversation came up last time, Dustin.
Yeah,
what you're
it
thinking
was
about.
when it actually came up,
Yeah.
and it was too little too late because policy, they didn't even investigate the potentials because it wasn't a usable
Well,
funding source.
in those particular years, they didn't give us the pilot
Right.
because
gas
there was
portion, yeah.
because they didn't have, because by code, I think it says something to the effect of it's in reserves that they transfer. So
Could they just kind of build on that quick? Could CFU make that decision to, rather than increasing rates to cover some of those overages, they could just take a smaller revenue amount, which then would decrease the amount they have to transfer to us?
yes, and that's what they did for 2 or 3 years. I can't remember.
Yeah.
So. But they also came back in some of the stronger years and did pay those back.
Okay.
So
So A15,
Yes.
So hotel motel tax, again, this is going to be financial policy D3J, but the city currently has 7% of the hotel motel tax, 50% of the income generated by the imposition of the tax being devoted to V&T division. The other 50% is devoted to programs related to parks, lakes, trails, recreation, kind of those good quality of life type positions.
River project?
Yeah,
Yes,
there's-
and,
yeah.
and it's actually funded, the hotel motel funded some of those. So if you look at the 7% hotel motel tax, 50% is devoted to the visitors and tourism, 50% is devoted to programs related to parks, lakes, trails, those type of things. Again, you know, the good quality of life projects, this is one of the few funding sources that we have set aside for specifically that.
So Ron, is this something that's state mandated, or is that what we chose as a council years back?
I think that's what the voters chose
Yeah,
when
when they-
established the tax.
Mhm.
I know 7's the max.
Mhm.
Looked up last year.
So it was a part of the vote on the division of where that tax would go? That was a part of the vote?
I would have to look but I think that's correct. I'd have to actually go back and look at what the language was on the bond.
Voting to even have motel tax.
Correct.
Yes, and typically it outlines, it's kind of very similar to like the local option sales tax that you all saw on the ballot. And, you know, it specifically laid out what those fundings
Does this
can be
have to
used for.
renewed every 10, 20 years or something?
This one does not have a sunset date.
No.
Nor does last now.
Right.
Yep. So, just
So D3J?
Yeah.
We can't really change it.
Yeah.
So where are we at? One more here, just to kind of show you the hotel motel funding right now. This is kind of a breakdown of where we are. Visitors and tourism is about 600,000. Cultural division's about 204,000. Parks we have right at 108. Trails, quality of life projects 42. So this is the FY25 budget, which is about 1.2 million.
So this is what we'll be reviewing in the budget?
Yes. And again, these breakdowns are kind of in what we have there. And so there's the economic development funds that they just looked at giving out. So, yes.
So Don, on the trails, it seems like there's discussions of different things for safety and whether we have a bicycling trail and separate the walking trail for safety. This is where the money comes from.
Yes, so there's actually a maintenance trail in the budget. So when we go into whether it's resurfacing a trail, going in and making spot repairs, or adding some of those things, there is a budget for maintenance for trails.
And same thing on the CIP, that would be one of the funding sources too. You'll see like hotel, motel, tax, dash trails, and it's showing which trails it's helping fund.
So here's just a little bit of a historical look at hotel motel tax collections throughout the time period. So you can see FY20, not much. I would have guessed a bigger dip, but look at the bounce back that's actually come back. So
It's surprising it's that low.
that's exactly.
We had
So you-
several hotels came online before COVID.
Right.
So they were giving some revenue to offset what would have been a bigger dip.
This wasn't project.
So road use tax. Some of you may hear us.
I think Dustin had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to double check on the hotel motel tax. Does $600,000 cover V&T's budget? Or is they have a lot more expense than that?
I'm trying to think. No, they have a bigger budget than that, but they also probably have some other
Other funding
funding
sources.
sources, you know, that they use. But I want to say their budget's maybe more like 800 and some thousand. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can look.
Just curious. We can move on to road use.
So road use tax, what you may hear from staff a lot of times is an interchangeable term of street construction funds. And so these are dollars that are generated by the state of Iowa throughout the gas tax, throughout the community. And so this is policy A12, financial policy A12. But really, the city receives about $5.5 million a year, and we discuss. There's discussion at the state level about how this is going to be offset by some of the electric cars, because most of it is a gas tax. So how are they going to? I think there's going to be some legislation coming forward, just how they can capture some of those as well. It's just interesting how different states collect revenue from that. Some states just do it simply by what type of vehicle or through your license year every year. So in the state of Iowa, it might cost you $500 to register your truck, but in a different state, it may cost you $2,000. So anyway, those are just different ways that they generate their revenue. In this particular, the city receives about 5.5 million, and some of the costs go for some of our road construction, our road repairs, any type of maintenance that we may have, some maintenance equipment, for instance, mowers, plows, etc., and some staffing costs that are in there, just to name kind of a few of those type of costs.
A11? A12, sorry.
So this is our lost policy that the council just approved and the voters just overwhelmingly approved. Moving on, so it's D3I. So, where am I at here? So, again, 100% of the revenue generated in the cities during the fiscal year said local sales and services is to be allocated to a reconstruction, repair, replacement of existing streets. So, again, it was, what's that? So, alleys would qualify. So, established in 1991, last voted on in 2023. There's no expiration date. Generally, approximately $6 million a year. Typically, with this, there's no new roads, no new alleys that are established. So, for instance, if there's a new roadway, Green Hill Road's extending somewhere else, I'm just making a scenario up, these dollars wouldn't be allowed. Now, existing Green Hill Road, if we're going to reconstruct it, these dollars would be allowed. So it's used for no new roadways. And I would say, since I've been here, I can't think of any of the dollars that have went towards anything but actually bricks and mortar. It's not been for studies or staffing or those things. It's strictly for construction. So Blackhawk County Gaming, this is kind of an interesting one. It's financial policy A19. So we've been coordinating with gaming for a number of years, and gaming has been very, very good to the city of Cedar Falls throughout the years. If you look right here, actually we have a handout.
Just do a quick check though on that last one. There were 2 policies. There's also E4.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I think we're mostly seeing E4 up there.
Yeah. But I just need to really just check both of them. So E4 also. Okay.
Thank you.
D3I. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So no, thank you. So we talked a little bit here about, I started in on gaming here and Blackhawk County. And again, like I said, Blackhawk County's been very good to us. If this is our most recent calendar, as you see the handout in front of you about what our projects are that we've submitted to them. So it's kind of an interesting thing with Blackhawk County Gaming. We received $1.5 million in a grant for the river project. And what Blackhawk County Gaming tells us is we should, as a community, expect, about $900,000 a year that we can apply for and look at different dollars. Now, having said that, as the boards change and their philosophies change a little bit, and that's good, so they're not always maybe funding the same type of projects, but as we move through there, some of that's been a little bit hard to navigate, but when you're asking for 1.5 million or 900,000, there should be some questions to answer and move through. So what we've done is, as a community, they tell us they like to see projects that are going to be, a little bit inspiring, or they don't want to see. Years ago, the city of Cedar Falls applied for funding for a gator for the fire department. Well, they don't want to see projects like that. Now, when they have smaller communities, they understand that's a big deal in their budget. Whereas with like Waterloo and Cedar Falls and some of the larger communities, they want to see bigger, more impactful projects. And so we received $1.5 million on the river. Right now, we have a full application in to the gaming board on $900,000. We're hoping to hear, what is that, before the first of the year, Stephanie?
Yes.
So we're hoping to hear if we're funded for that. And I can tell you, when we went to that and the board, we gave a presentation, and the board has a lot of questions for you. They want to know, okay, what are you using? How are other people accessing this? So there's just a number of things that you have to answer for. And so we try to, if you look like 22 and 23, we left those blank intentionally, knowing that, okay, we just got a $1.5 million ask. So here in 24, we're looking for 900,000. Now in 25, again, we're intentionally leaving that blank because we know in 2026, we're looking at the Hearst Center. And so that's a conversation that we'll have a little bit later is, where we are with the Hearst Center and the support from our elected officials. So, so again, as we move forward with the CIP this year and we figure out, okay, here's some projects, you may see, Black Hawk County Gaming as a funding source for some of those. Right now, we don't have anything that we've identified. The Cedar Falls Schools has asked the city about the Tiger Performance Center request, and up to this point, we've said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to back up because this is a little antiquated, and it's not always clear coming from gaming. So they've said the city should expect about $900,000 a year, to use, and so the city should always be the applicant. But we don't necessarily have to be the applicant. So the University of Northern Iowa could actually be the applicant, but that would come out of the city's fund. The Cedar Falls Schools could come out of that, could do that, but it would come out of the city's fund as well. So,
because I did meet with Emily Hanson today, I can add just a few things to that.
So
okay?
Go ahead.
They did kind of clarify that they do think of UNI as separate. So then this is all up in the air based on who's on the selection committee, who's on their board, what their views are, what their priorities are. And then the amount per year, it's not an actual they expect to give us every year an equal amount. It's over a 10 to 15 year period. They're trying to keep it even per capita based on where the money's coming from. But so we can't just expect every 2 years look at X amount of money. So it's just kind of depending on the projects we have, and they're always kind of revolving. Sometimes they're getting into doing sometimes multi-year grants for larger amounts. So it, like you were saying, it's not always a clear cut, they have an allocated amount for us each year. So it's just an ongoing relationship that we need to keep working with them on.
Yeah,
It has to do with the gaming revenues or the
that was
recession coming.
that was the next part that we were going to bring up is, it depends. The gaming revenues here are fairly strong. They're about pre-pandemic levels again. I don't want to keep talking. So as we move forward, here's just another slide with regard to we're about pre-pandemic levels. The revenues are not great, but they're not horrible. Now, some of this can, my understanding is there's a new casino that's come online in Nebraska somewhere, and that may have some slight impacts to it. There's also some information with regard to who knows what's going to happen with the Cedar Rapids. That could have a devastating effect if that happens. So anyway, as we move forward, this is a great opportunity, but we are fortunate to have it, and I think we've got to continue to work with our longtime partners there. So see if here's some of the historical things that we've had: community tennis courts on the UNI campus, park improvements, public safety equipment, library, co-lab, the public safety building, place to play park. They were a huge investor in there. University Avenue, downtown streetscapes, Cedar River project. So
I think it's also worth mentioning that when we do bigger asks in our private-public partnerships, sometimes that means then they don't fund the private side. So, for example, Searly Park, they told us they would not fund because the city already had an ask out for the Cedar River project. So that's just something to keep in mind.
And something Emily said is they do the big ones, but also, we don't need to always just go after a big one shot. Let's use up all the funds for one project. They will also do it was 50 to 100,000 for something. So it's a limited resource that we have to kind of prioritize.
And that is a little bit of a shift from the board, because the board once upon a time said, okay, Cedar Falls, you're a big community, we want bigger projects from you. And it really does depend on who the board is, and that's good, because like I said before, they're not always funding the same type of projects, and they're spreading some of those monies out. But.
So Danny, you don't think they consider Cedar Falls and UNI to be the same entity?
So that was me with Emily. She did say there's not a clear yes, no, they're a whole separate, but they do think of UNI as their own big entity. They definitely said the school system and the city are definitely in that same.
Sure.
So we need to coordinate with them on projects, but I
that's
think
this current board.
Yeah, and that's this current board. But I think there is definitely a recognition that it's not fair to treat the city as the same entity and grouping as the university, because they have some massive projects that they own.
So E19?
So one of the questions, and this isn't a policy question, maybe it's a little bit, I want to go back and see, so Tiger Performance Center. The group that is raising the money for the Tiger Performance Center has asked the city, hey, how about you contributing to, like you're contributing to the pool? And the question that we've had as staff is, okay, the pool, we program, the pool, there's a give and take on the usage and some of those things. What would the public then be able to access with regard to the Tiger Performance Center? And they said, well, not really, because it's really going to be used for students and student athletes, and I get that. So our response to them at this time has been, it's really not something that we feel as staff, or I believe the council, this is a new council, that's why I'm bringing that up, is going to support. So that's been the response now, and I know Stephanie works with them as well. But how does the council feel about putting the Tiger Performance Center request into our gaming calendar? Again, I can tell you when we were at the school for the pool, we had about 15 minutes of questions, and there was a lot of, hey, what about the public? How is the public accessing this versus the school, and how are you programming that, and some of those things. So now, depending on how those questions, or if they look at this as a different project, we don't know. But again, is this something that the council feels that they, again, I think the Tiger Performance Center is a great project. It's a fantastic project, but it's a school project and not necessarily a city project.
But you said that the school wouldn't necessarily, like the kind of unwritten policies that the school doesn't necessarily do the ask because it's considered Cedar Falls. Is that why? So
Stephanie can jump in here, but I believe what the group is asking is right now, can we put it on our calendar? And what they're still not asking for monies from us, but they're asking us to put it on our calendar to show that there's city support for the Tiger Performance Center, not a financial support.
And I think it's clarification with Emily Hansen, who's like director, that the school could apply for it, but either way, they're going to want to see a written thing from the city saying.
Because we're all kind of.
When you talked about use of the facility, that feedback came from the school district, or that came from the private individuals that are doing the fundraising?
Well, kind of both, because when we've been in the meetings with them, Dr. Petit's been in there as well. And so it's just, I don't know when they would be able to program it, because they'd be using it during the school day. They're also going to be using it after schools and evenings for some of those things, weekends, practices. It's going to be very difficult. So, and again, I think it's a fantastic program or project, but it's not a city project. So the question to this group is, and maybe it doesn't get answered tonight, but before we send our new gaming request calendar to them, which would be after the CIP is approved, do we want to include the Tiger Performance Center? And if we're not prepared,
wait. I don't know if we got an answer tonight. I don't have an answer tonight.
And that's fine. We can move forward.
You kind of just said that the school could apply as long as they know that we're supportive of that.
That's what.
So.
And I think
would
that's
say-
what this document does, is show the support. Again, not financial support.
That kicks her center application down the road.
That's what I mean.
We've already committed to
The
that.
money's got to go.
Is that going to jeopardize the 1.5 for the HERS Center?
So Stephanie, do you know the timing? I see we have December 24, January 25 here. So are they still looking at keeping it here?
Yes, because it would be, gaming's fiscal calendar is the same as ours, so it would be fiscal 25 for gaming.
So yeah, that is the challenge is it would hurt the HERS Center potentially.
So
Yeah,
we
I
would
would
like
say enough. I think we do know enough, in my opinion. I'm not trying to correct anybody, just to inform you. The original ask from the school covered certain expenses, and then we added on, and we came their way by the tune of about $2 million. I think they asked for $5 million on the pool, or $3 million.
We're at 8.
So we're at 8 total in to help with the pool because it's a community pool. The Tiger Performance Center was also another add-on after the fact, and it is a fantastic idea. It's going to be ROI for the community. It's a good thing, but it'll kick our other plans down the road. So I think we support their fundraising efforts, but we don't apply for them in lieu of them. Maybe we entertain a resolution that says, we're a fan of this project. If you want to grant that, please keep in mind our submission because we want to keep the Hearst going. We don't want to unfund that remodel. Right.
I
So
could
I'd
say
say
just
thank
for
you for
the-
asking. We're in support of you trying to fund it however you need to, but we're going to ask for the money for the Hearst.
So you think we do that here or at a council?
Well, we'll see when the request is, if the request comes in. But what I'm hearing right now is we would not include it on our calendar that we send to, on this document that we
Send to Blackhawk.
send to Blackhawk County unless something changes between now and that time period.
I would say
Is that,
It's not a city request, it could be a school request.
Yeah. And I think the school's got plenty of options for funding.
And just to clarify, that document we're sending them is not a, here's what we're asking for. It's just a general,
it's a
here's
general.
things we think are coming up.
And really, it's to give them also some budgeting purposes, so they know. So when they look at what their 5-year revenues are, and when they have to get it, you know, the other biggest challenge that they have, which is not to go down another rabbit hole, is they kind of like to be the last dollar in and out because they have to allocate. Once they allocate those monies, they have to have them spent. So they don't. They really frown on extensions because they're not getting that money spent, and that's because of the state of Iowa, the requirements that the state has on them getting those spent.
I think it's more than just showing support. I mean, we have a limited number of asks, essentially.
Yes.
So,
So, thank you for that. Again, wasn't really a policy decision, but so. Okay, we got a couple more, or maybe it's just one more of, maybe a couple more here, but before we get to the doozy. So there's been a financial policy, which is financial policy G17, and really that is it's when there's a community or special interest projects that are out there. What the council's policy is to ask for 25% of that coming from private donations, and that's I would say actually it's kind of a loose policy because I'll use some projects here. So the River Project, they came to the council and they're just under 10% with their ask. The Hearst Center, though, they're looking at raising about 29% of the project. The high school pool, that group is raising 14%, but it's also $3 million, so it's not 14% is $25,000. Searly Park is 25%. So really the criteria for the private donation is really a quality of life, if it's got a lot of GO funding and cash in hand. What I would tell you, what I believe the policy is, and maybe we need to reword it, is I think the policy is for some of these projects that are new. Hey, we want a new park. We would like to do that. We can raise 25% of the money. Once that park's been established, I believe it's the city's obligation to maintain and upgrade and do those. It's going to be very difficult to go out and ask for folks to upgrade that. Now, if in the meantime, I'm going to use Searly Park. Searly Park's a fantastic project, but there was some, and Hannah, you may know a little bit more than I do on this, but there was some specific ask. For instance, we have a shelter that we were looking at putting in there and replacing, but they had a certain design for the shelter that they would like. So there's some give and take on some of those fundraising efforts. I don't know if you have anything to add on that. But.
Yeah, and I think that it, like our perspective as the private, it kind of helped us to be able to connect and say what we would like to see, and kind of gave us some stake in the game, and that I think was really helpful to get people to know that we were serious about the project.
But as we move forward, I'm going to use a Birdsell Park. Birdsell Park is we have that in some projects coming, and some conversations coming up. Birdsell Park is tired. I mean, it just is. It's tired. It's unusable for some of these tournament things, and we're going to have to reinvest. It would be I think it would be very challenging to tell a private group, hey, we're not doing anything out there until you raise 25%. So I really do believe that that as Hannah put it, and I would say that new projects or projects where neighborhoods want specific things, I think that's when the private donation portion of that comes in.
I agree with that, but you also have that strange push-pull, you know. The organization gave 25%, so how much weight does the organization have in determining design? Okay, you see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
We're giving money because we want this, but is that really that private entity?
Well, and when we sit down with them as staff, you know, we're like, well, we can't maintain that.
Right.
Or, you know, we can't maintain that, but if we tweaked it and did this, it makes for a much better design. So, like you said, it's a lot of give and take, and I think you guys have been in some of those negotiations going
Definitely.
back.
Definitely.
But the concern that I'm hearing though is as time goes on, like for instance, Birdsall Park, we're not gonna wait for a private entity to
No.
come up with money to,
And I don't think
for
we
something.
can.
Yeah, and
But I
or-
think there's, but I do think if there was another group that came out and said, hey, we want a park in our neighborhood and we'd like to put it here,
Sure.
we'd be asking for,
Sure.
because the other thing that you want to make sure of is it one person saying that, or is there really a community drive to get whatever that is? For instance, the River Project was, there was a whole bunch of people that came together that said, hey, we want this, and they're raising a significant amount of money to do that.
But as time goes on, who's gonna maintain that?
Well, I think once the city accepts that project, that it's now the city's responsibility. So, for instance, the city was, I don't know the numbers, but we were in kind for the Place to Play park out there. Those fantastic ladies did a wonderful job raising that money and getting that project. So now it's on us to go ahead and maintain that and Chase and his staff have done a great job going out there and fixing some things and trying to keep it, you know. Unfortunately, parks are just so susceptible to vandalism and graffiti and some of those things, but you know, they've been very good about going out there. We had unfortunately a couple of years ago we had the cheese bandit that just unbelievable.
Who knew the damage cheese can do?
So one Monday morning they went out there and somebody had taken like the craft singles and wallpapered the restroom
And the toilet.
and the toilet and everything. So with
With craft
cheese.
singles.
So then after that,
Maybe.
so then after that, a few days later, they went out there with cheesecakes and smeared it all over the restroom. So I don't.
It took a power washer though to get it
Oh,
off,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's going down a little bit of a.
And then they were prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
I don't think that's really a Banksy thing.
So anyway, I think the private donation G17 should still be there, but we've got to make sure that, you know, we're looking at it in new or special interest type things.
Well, so just a question in terms of how it's written is slightly different, from the practice, or are you asking if there's some edits or changes to
Yeah,
that?
I know.
It really sounds like it needs to be
G17.
the 25% of the cost for a new project, something that's not currently established. Correct?
Yes. And that new project could include little projects within the bigger project, like on Searly Park, and they're talking about hey, we want a certain gazebo, or we want a certain shelter, or some of those things. But
So if we're not meeting our policy now, it either needs to be changed or.
I think we are. Maybe not the dollar figures on the policy, but some of those special interest groups have actually come back to the council and said, for instance, the River Group came back and said, hey, we think we can raise this much. Is that good? And the council okayed that.
And the policy is just we will seek, you know,
Yeah.
not we must have.
And do we have a standard on how we decide that they have to raise a certain amount before we even commit to supporting the project, or?
So typically what we do is those monies are in the city's possession before projects bid. So we know that those dollars are there. The river project was one, again, they came back to the council and asked, hey, we're going to be raising monies all the while that you're doing this. So the council said, okay.
And it was in the middle of the pandemic,
Yes.
like it was that was probably a
So-
special circumstance.
So, but typically on projects when we want the money raised and so when it goes out for bid, that money's on hand.
So just to clarify, right now it says 25%, but to Aaron's point, it says C. So are you comfortable keeping it at 25%, the number?
Yeah.
And then are you wanting to add new, which was Chris's
I'd like to see
suggestion?
new.
I think because the reason why, I think, is sometimes it's confusing, I think, for also the groups maybe who, I know for the place to play, that's been kind of confusing, at least, I mean, it's not anymore because staff clarified it, but I think some of those groups, or remember when the Rotary did their thing and we had the conversation about the cost of the lighting? And we ended up, yeah, because they're like, look, we might not even, we're an aging group, we may not even, I mean, basically they said that.
Yeah.
Right, so I think we should add the new, shouldn't we? Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, to Ron's point,
Right.
I think the maintenance is responsibility of the city.
right.
I've been thinking about it too, I do like, the threshold, I can see a project that, we'd say 10%, we could budget for that, and that would be enough, depending on what the council thought.
Because I do think,
But seeking 25%, I do think, so the riverfront idea and other projects, it also shows the strong community support, it's either there or it's not,
So SEEK gives you the flexibility.
so it gives you the
Or-
flexibility, because it can be project dependent.
And sometimes it helps sway the people voting on the project.
Yeah.
because there's sometimes I think where the city saying we're going to support this makes the fundraising far easier. Because when you're fundraising, you're saying, well, the city might back this if we raise enough. Is a very different thing than this is going to happen. We're working with the city, we're fundraising.
Yeah, the city will commit X as long as we raise it. As long as.
Okay, so we're just adding 25% of / for new recreation and quality of life.
Yes.
Okay, C.
Agreed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to get into really kind of one more topic, and then we'll get into some budget House File 714, and then we'll get into some projects kind of after we move from there. So really, here's some of our budget challenges that we have coming up in the next couple of years. Again, loss of backfill to the general fund and offsetting some of the cost of those projects. As we know, employee pay and benefits will continue to rise. The rollback and the tax burden shifts from residential over to commercial. Some of our increased capital costs, and we put together some things, and just to give some examples of what some of those are. So our dump truck costs have increased from the years 2020 to 2022 from about 150,000 to about 175,000. So you can see that's a significant increase. Now, having said that, that's if we can find them. So the other thing is we'll order trucks and they may go 12, 18 months. So a refuse truck has gone from approximately 200,000 to about 265,000 in 32% increase, and that's another one that especially if we can find those. So supply chain issues have been very difficult. Again, most of our trucks and some of those type of things we're waiting 12 to 24 months. Some of the commodities such as roadstone, salt, concrete, those things over the past 2 to 3 years have gone up 30%.
So Ron,
Yes.
to the point that somebody over on that side made, and that was the fire truck, ladder truck. We should start a sinking fund for some of these big expenses, I would think.
Yeah, we can, but it's again going to be a property tax increase. So it's coming out of the general fund, or do you want to do try to do it in the one-time expenses of the bonding sales? And traditionally, that's what we've done. That frees up other general fund dollars.
guess we have plenty of cushion, we're at, what was it, 9% or something like that. So we can go higher, we just haven't by policy.
Because it does mean a tax increase.
Yeah,
Just because
you-
you can bond more doesn't, I mean, it does have an effect on taxes. Yep.
Do we want a generally higher, slightly higher steady rate or
Well,
the one-time stuff?
I think we, in the future, depending on what interest rates do, when we have low interest rates, we need to bond more, lock in more money, stagger out the bonds, instead of just rotating on a 2-year basis.
Yeah, but
So we
remember,
had almost zero interest rates, we could have bonded out a lot of money.
but remember, you have to state the purpose and use those within 2 years. So, you know, we can name all the stuff we want, but one of the things that was challenging this year, and I'll just, it's going to be a very interesting thing for next year. I don't know that we could do any more projects. And that's not saying that staff couldn't do any or we couldn't hire consultants to get those. It's the contractors in the area. We don't have the capacity. We were probably full. There's not a lot of extra room to do any more road projects or those type of things this past year, just because the contractors were, I mean, so full. You know, and you can ask Chase. They're thankful for a fairly warm November, because otherwise we would have been done laying concrete. So moving those forward is going to be challenging, and as we continue to move forward. So
I would say to go to that though. That's why I think it's so important for us to get a good comprehensive plan and long-term vision in place, is so that we have projects when we have years where it's really low, that we could say, okay, maybe we should accelerate and do that project this year and bond for it, because now's a good time to do it. But I don't think we've had that in place to really be able to say, well, maybe we pull that to.
Technically, you go to the CIP and say, let's bring something forward.
yes.
I mean, they're there. So we can do that.
So we talked a little bit about the operating costs. Consolidated dispatch continues to be a concern. So
What's the increase on that this year?
Craig, yeah, what was?
The increase that was just voted on a day or two ago is another 75 or 80,000 per Cedar Falls.
And what is it we're using? How much of it? And then
We now pay 36% of dispatch costs for the county. Waterloo pays 40%, and we use around 20% of the service. Waterloo use about 55% of the service.
So it would really be nice for, you know, I don't know, many of you may have seen one of the Dan Terrelka came forward and was asking about some evidence rooms and some of those things. Well, if we're looking at that, you know, couldn't all of that fall under an EMA levy that would be funded by the county? So I think those are things that we have to continue to talk about. We continue to have major outside funding requests. We'll go over some of those within in the evenings that we have ahead. And then House 718 and some of the consolidated levy and some of the things that they've done. I shouldn't say to us, but to us.
They did it for us.
So yes, they did it for us. So I think that's just real briefly on some of the budget challenges that we have coming up. And if everybody's good, I'm going to jump right into House File 718. So one of the biggest challenges that they've presented to us is the city rate consolidation. So the city for many, many years has had the voters decided, hey, we're going to have a separate levy for both the municipal band and also the library. And the state said, no, you're not. So now that is all going to be under our 810 levy. If you actually look at by FY29, all of our special levies will have to fall under the 810. So currently it's $8.39. So what happens is those dollars now come out under the 810 levy. We're going through this. Jen and her staff probably know a little bit more than I do about House File 718 right now. But I can tell you we're also learning every day on some of this. Our folks sit in on some of those things. So, you know, one of the policy discussions, and this would be kind of a new policy, but under this new proposal, what you have in front of you is that the city now has talks about what they're going to allocate to the library and also the municipal band, and so what as we move forward with the budget, we'll have to indicate that within the budget, and so Jen, if I'm right here, so the band last time, or the Cedar Falls Library was around 560,000, and the municipal band was about 35,000. So we collect those taxes now and then allocate those back to those. Our for this upcoming fiscal year, the council now have the policy that's not in your handouts, because this would be a new policy. Council now has the discretion about how much funding goes to the library and band. No set levy amounts now. The policy is consider still providing the library and band the same dollars as received in the FY24, and that would be for this next FY25 to go ahead and make them whole.
Ron, are we one of the few cities that have a bond levy, a band levy?
I think 2.
Yeah, I think there's a total of 3, I want to say. I think.
How did
Yeah.
it come to be? And
Voters.
Voters voted years ago. I mean,
There's
it was
no
a long
sunset.
time ago.
well, here's a sunset.
Well,
Now there is, you're right. Now there is.
We're cutting services. We're kind of saying we don't want to do these services that we've offered.
Well,
Which I would say are services that are used.
Yeah.
And the library.
No,
So-
I'm kind of going at the band.
Oh,
Would that be under visitors and tourism or something, or rec?
Oh. Instead of put,
well, either way, it still has to come out of the budget.
right, the $8.10.
And you're cutting services if you don't
If we
allocate.
don't reallocate it.
No, I didn't mean take out of the budget, I mean come from the.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to
those
allocate them.
So the band travels, so that hotel would be.
Yeah, it's quality of life, could have come out of one of those.
But are we gonna give them more money?
Keep them whole.
We're gonna give wherever.
So we're gonna budget to make whole what is being lost from the,
Yes, we're not gonna lose services. Is
and that's what
we're
you're
saying.
proposing is we basically keep this at the same funding amounts, but it would be coming
So-
from budget.
So
rather
for
than-
this year, as we move forward, it would be relatively the same amount, the 560,000 and the 35,000, and next year. Now, having said that, I do think there may be some movement in the legislature to reconsider the library, but
An amendment.
we're
hopefully.
not sure. So
So the library levy is then voted statewide, or is that just us?
Voted by the county.
it was specific to Cedar Falls.
Cedar Falls, the library levy was a Cedar Falls vote.
Okay. So it seems odd that the state legislators would interfere. on
Weird, huh?
Yeah. That's, I think, was their surprise, Daryl, exactly. I mean, it seems weird that you kind of pick on the thing that the voters voted on, but that is also probably the philosophy about home rule. I think it is the state probably telling us they're not really in favor of home rule.
Compelling reason.
Yeah.
I think it was because they were focused on the $8.10, and I don't know that they really considered what that would do.
Sure.
But it will affect in our area, not
Yeah.
only the band, the library, and then, I mean, I know it's, our neighboring city,
Yeah.
but it also affects museums in our area.
So I think what Ron and I,
The library
yeah.
levy?
Waterloo has a separate museum, I don't know what it's called. The-
Grout
like a-
museum
like-
is-
They were all voted by the.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, a museum levy or whatever that the Grout's under in Waterloo.
Just because our children's museum isn't built yet doesn't
Yeah.
mean we don't have money for it.
Dustin's trying to build a museum.
And I think what Ron and I were just searching for tonight is, as we develop the budget, again, we know we have some factors we don't know yet, so we're gonna learn more here in a few weeks, but, I think just to give us some direction when we develop the budget, is that just generally what council wants to try to aim for is to keep the amounts the same for FY24, for FY25 that they got in 24 for the band and library. Now, obviously, as we get everything and we put all the numbers together and get valuations, we may be coming to the budget and saying something a little different. I think it was just to kind of give us some direction.
Well, if the EMA levy comes through and the consolidated dispatch is off the budget.
Yeah, there we go.
Just opens
Got
up
it
all
up.
this.
All of it.
So
I just heard
in terms of this
unicorn.
I got you, Jessica.
One
The
million
guidance
dollars.
that you right now in the budget you come back with would show keeping
Okay.
those services.
Okay.
That's 20.
Okay.
Some of the other thing, just with regard to the budget, so by ratcheting down some of these things, if you talk about non-TIF taxable growth, if it's under 3%, we won't have any ratcheting down in that is it the 810, Jen?
Well, it'll be between
It's
the $8.39 and $8.10 over the next 5 years.
So if our non-TIF growth over the 3% is less than 6%, we got a 2% reduction factor. And then the non-TIF taxable growth over 6%, there's a 3% reducible factor. So it's kind of hitting hard and fast.
So I think which just shows earlier when we talked about taxable value and rollback, but hey, what are the valuations going to come in, 20% or whatever, you may think, hey, okay, that's maybe going to offset the loss, but now we have to remember, but we also have to get our 810s getting ratcheted down, so to speak, over the next 5 years, depending on our growth. So you can't really capture all of your growth, you're going to be limited. So it is kind of another factor we don't quite know yet until we get our valuations.
So lobbying our legislators before the next session should have started yesterday. We should all be happy, right?
So,
See if we can change this back.
Is that January 26th?
I think January 26th is the day we
Now
should.
that you mentioned it, if Friday, January 26th is, we're trying to get our local legislators the meeting with our elected officials here. We'll have our lobbyists with that, and so if everybody could please pencil that in your calendars.
You want to be lobbying them now.
Yeah, this is when,
They're writing bills
before they get in the session. And I think they had a really good session over at the Grout Museum, where they kind of addressed some of these, but we'll see what they can do. So
This wasn't in Cope and Murphy advisement last year.
House File 718 came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the hope that the revolt from the people has the potential to change it. So calling the elephant.
So here's with the budget process and notice and mailing. So as we talk about this, the new deadline is April 30th, which in my mind is kind of an artificial deadline, because if you look a couple of bullet points down, the city needs to get the information to the county by March 5th. So they can get that out by March 20th. So in a couple slides here, we'll talk a little bit about the schedule on moving some of that forward. So it's going to seem like, hey, we're accelerating it, but we're not doing it. It's the state. So
I just want to jump in too, Ron, just because I know there was a question the other night about the max levy or whatever, that hearing. So just let everyone know, so that it has changed a little bit. There's not the max levy hearing, but you still have to have a separate and a distinct meeting on where you're talking about the total proposed levy. And then you have the hearing to approve your budget. So it's almost like the same, how we still have to have two hearings. It's just not called the same thing, but we do have to have that. And the thing that is new is it says it has to be a separate and distinct meeting. So we can't do that at a council meeting. And we have to know that date to put in the letter by March 5th. So now they advised us that you can do it on the same night, you would just have to do a different time. So we could do it like at 5 o'clock on a council meeting night, which to me probably kind of that's probably what we would do. It's kind of like when we've had a committee meeting on the budget, seems to make sense. Yeah. So that's why I just wanted to jump in, because I knew there was that question, Ron, and then you'll kind of see that in the schedule. We mapped out how we kind of put that in there.
So one more thing before we get to the schedule with House File 718 is if you actually look at homestead credits and exemptions for over 65, you get a credit and exemption. So in FY25, that goes, it's at $3,250, the exemption, and then goes up to $6,500. And so the military exemption starting in FY25 increases from $1,852 to $4,000. Great if you're a property owner, but this does end up in about a $200,000 loss for revenue for the city in that increase. So those are like we say, so those are, it's not that we're opposed to any of those things, it is just some of the budgeting challenges that we face.
So this is proposed?
This is not proposed, this is
So we need to know-
starting in FY '25. So when we get our valuations, the county will knock these off of there. Here we go with regard to the schedule that we've talked about a little bit. We need, so do you have, which one is the special meeting?
Well, it's way to
There's the April 1st?
Yep.
So April 1st, we are proposing the special meeting. And that would be that's not a typical council meeting, is it? That's. So,
It would be
yeah.
a council night, but I was proposing that we could do it like at 5 o'clock
So
that
is
night.
it-
Yep. Yep.
So, again, the schedule's gonna come at you fast and furious. We'll have the CIP things that are in there as well. That will take up the first 2 meetings in January. We'll also run through this schedule with regard to the proposed budget. So if the council sees any problems with this, one of the things that we ask is let's try to get some special meetings on the docket here, because otherwise we're just going to run out of time. We won't get things done. And keep in mind, the earlier we can know that we have a special meeting, the better, because of some of the public notice requirements. You know, I forget, it's like 10 days, but not more than...
No less than 10, no more than 20.
Yeah. And so we've got to make sure that we meet those notice requirements for some of the public hearings and some of those things, so.
If I can jump in too
Go,
again,
go.
if that's okay. So as you can see in February, I think what staff hopes to do is come to a meeting in February to kind of just generally propose where we think the budget's at and what you feel comfortable setting it at. Now, the council doesn't have to take action, which really, this is kind of back to like max levy too. You can always go down. So when that letter goes out and that meeting in February, we may say, I don't know, I'll just make it, like our levy rate's gonna be $11.50 or whatever. We can always go down. So when we get into April and you have the actual meetings to vote on the budget, again, you can always go down. So I just wanted to remind people that we don't, right, but we can't go up. So I think for February, it's just, okay, what do we generally feel good about? I mean, we can keep it the same too, but I just want to make sure people kind of understand, but then you don't actually vote on it till April. And the thing why it gets so tight is so that mailings go out on March 20th, and when you think about it, you have to give the public time to get their mail, see it, if it's supposed to be about informing them. It's not like you can have your hearing on March 21st is what I'm trying to say. You do have to give them some time to get the mailing, and so that's why I was proposing that April 1st, it's just, but could we have a special meeting in between there to talk about it? Yeah, but we can't do it on March 21st. We have to give them some days. Mail might take 3 days or whatever it is. So that's what's unfortunate, even though April 30th sounds like a long way. Really, then right after, it's almost like you have to have those hearings right away in April to get it all done by April 30th.
That's your 6th council meeting is all, so it's not like it's that far out, so. And again, we're going to establish the budget in cooperation with all of the policies we just kind of went through. So we'll see where we're at once we get to that particular time frame.
It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll have some communication needs, because it sounds like we're shifting a lot of, like we might be increasing the millage rate, not actually increasing overall taxes, it's just a lot of things are getting put from tax levies shifted to property taxes, so it might look like we're increasing it, but really it's not even as a whole, but we're gonna have to communicate why that's going up.
Yeah, and it's going to be challenging because this person may have a different concern than this person, depending on how much their property value assessment went up. Correct.
So I think, Danny, to your point, I think those charts we showed earlier in the night, I think exactly why we always wanted to communicate. We've always used those charts to show what is the real impact on your property taxes.
Yeah.
Right, there's many times people could just say, oh, no, we lowered the rate. Well, they did, maybe, but if the rollback went up, their taxes are going to go up. So we've tried to be kind of clear about that, but I think you're right. I think that continues to be a communication we'll need to do. Yeah.
So that's really kind of the end of the budget portion. I have a few capital projects that want to go through and just update and see where the council is for support on some of these larger projects. So unless there's any other questions.
It's 5 till 7.
Yeah, we can hold off on these.
I just want to do a check with the group because we're scheduled 4 to 7, and it's 5 minutes to 7.
Let's get it done. I agree.
So, okay,
You got
so
5 minutes.
I got 5 minutes.
Plow ahead.
You guys,
That's what it really meant. You've got 5 minutes. That's an extension.
so as I talked about a little bit earlier, this is going to be a large expenditure that we're talking about, $2.1 million. If we go back in time to 1998, I think this was between $800,000 and $900,000. So you can see over time how much that is. But again, here we are, a community our size with that our ladder truck lasted 30 years and is still in good shape. Now, having said that, we may try to sell it on the secondary market, which Dustin is really good at. But
Facebook Marketplace?
Yeah.
But 31 or 32 years.
You can get bids.
What's that?
Could we go 31 or 32 years?
You can, but you start looking at the seals and some of the mechanicals that they've already been working on, and so, okay, how far do you run it into the ground? It's like anything. Our financial system, we took that all the way. I think the financial system's about 2 steps above the abacus. So, but we're moving forward with that. So, again. You'll see this, and how we initially have it funded right now is $2.1 million in 2028, and so we'll continue to move forward with that. But what you'll see is probably some movement in 25-26 about looking at getting this thing ordered, and if it's still looking at a 900-day time frame. So move forward with that. I'm going to go quickly through some of these slides. Just because there's quite a few of them in here, but so the Hearst Center, as many of you know, we've been doing some master planning for the Hearst Center, and we can go into a lot of detail and a lot of what we have here with regard to some of this. What we have right now currently on the Hearst facility this is what the budget's looking like. The next step that will be coming forward to this group will be a contract looking to do a feasibility study on do they think that they can raise the $2.3 million in the private funding. So and where is that? So they'll be looking at there'll be an agreement coming forward, a contract for a group that does those type of studies, and then we'll go from there. Again, this is one of those projects. If we don't move forward within the next 5 years, we're really going to have a number of things that we need to address. Is the building's HVAC, the elevator. There's a number of bathrooms, those things that are all need to be updated. And when you start to look at it, that's about 10% of the cost of here. So you could do 10% of the cost here, which is somewhere between 800 and $1 million, and see if those are gonna, and then you still have an old building. So, so if the council's still supportive, we're gonna continue to move forward with the Hearst master planning. Here's really kind of the schedule that's been laid out with regard to moving forward and looking at getting the bid construction in that July 27 timeframe.
So do you just need general direction on that?
Just kind of, if somebody's, I realize that there's going to be several points when the council can vote up or down on some of these things, but if I heard 6 no's right now saying, we know, okay, now we can go a different way with funding and some of those things, but if this is still a worthwhile project that the council wants to move forward with, we're going to continue to fund it and move down that road, so. Thank you.
Ron, what did you say about this $700,000 worth of repairs that we would not move ahead with these?
So right now, there's some, we need to address some of the HVAC
They're on their unfunded
Oh,
list too,
they're,
yeah.
yeah, we've got them on the unfunded list, but the HVAC, the elevator's getting to the end of its.
So that's 350,000. Is that something that we would go ahead and do, even though?
We will not do those if we're going to move forward with planning a new Hearth Center. But if we're not going to move forward with the complete revamp, we're going to have to address those concerns.
So at minimum, those expenditures.
Yes, probably looking between $800 and $1 million and those type of expenditures just to, update the bathrooms, the HVAC, the elevators, a number of those things. There's yeah.
Maintain 2 or 3 of those buildings or whatever they got.
The new pool, the new pool is basically funded. We just wanted to go ahead and just give an overview on where we are. This pool's been split into 2 phases, the shell portion of and the pool portion of that. Again, we're looking at a hearing on our grant from Blackhawk County Gaming, but it looks like sometime in the spring, what we're hopeful for is the Blackhawk County Gaming grant, and then also what's the name of the other grant, Stephanie?
Enhance Iowa CAT grant.
The Enhance the CAT grant. So hopefully we're successful on both of those, and this project would be under construction. And what they'd like to do, I think they'll come up a little bit short, but they'd like to have it open the same time the pool is open, or the high school is open in the fall. Here's how it's laid out again in the CIP with regard to the CAT grant and some of those funding sources. So, again, I spoke a little bit earlier about Birdsall Park. Mike Soppe has come forward with a plan to really look at this area. This is one of those areas that we have a number of traveling teams within the community that play baseball, but we never host a tournament within the community just because we don't have the facilities. And it's just, the park is tired. It's been there a long time. We've done some minimal repairs, and so we're going to continue to look at this and start to schedule for some of these improvements. Here's kind of a layout of what they're looking at doing. It's currently unfunded, but we're going to review for a phased implementation. We talked about this private support. I just don't see a private group coming forward saying, hey, we're going to be so it's a park that we took on many years ago, and I think we need to upkeep it. That's citizens kind of deserve that, is not just letting it run into the ground. So,
has there been any conversation with the school about their facilities or them using these facilities?
So yeah, actually the head baseball coach actually came to a Park and Rec meeting maybe 8-9 months ago. I don't know what the time is, but talking about how even with they have one field that they can use for whether it's their freshman, sophomore, junior varsity, or varsity baseball teams. That so we get one home game a day is essentially what we get. Or there's opportunities to use some upgraded facilities.
Do we ever, or is there any good organization that can do good projections on if we invest 2.2 million, the potential tourism revenue or people coming to town?
So there's a lot of those organizations, like if you start talking to baseball or basketball, and they can and RV&T can also do that, saying, hey, here's what an event like that brings to the community. I can tell you, I had a really interesting conversation, and this is a little bit away from Birdsall Park, but an interesting conversation from one of the managers out of Shields. And it was the week before the playoffs, and he had said, make sure you don't come next week, because first of all, we can't get enough staff, and we're going to be so busy. And if you actually, I'm not at liberty to say the numbers that they were talking, but it doesn't take Shields long to make up what we would participate in the Dome dollars with. So for the funding that they're getting.
So they're a good sponsor to go to.
But yes, there are numbers that we can run and that our VNT run on certain type of events like this.
Ron, that's not currently in the CIP, or what number is it?
It's unfunded, it's on the
It's
unfunded
unfunded,
list.
so.
It is I on the unfunded, yeah.
But again, if we want to start looking more at quality of life projects and how do we move those quality of life projects forward, we're going to have to, kind of start looking at bringing them forward. Unidome renovations, so part of the reason that we have this on here, the request was originally 3 to 5 million to support the domes. If you recall, last year during the budget process, the city council brought this down to 2.5 million. So this would be the year in FY25 that it would go into the budget. So part of the reason that we're looking at that is just to make sure that we're moving along and still in the moving that product.
So what are you asking, or what are you saying that you want us to tell you if we want to increase that?
I did not say that.
I do.
I think we are under on that. I still think we should have went to 5.
Or at least the original 3 that they asked.
I
Where's
agree.
it coming from?
Economic development funds.
This is just, what your ask is do we want to continue with this project?
That's and to make everybody aware that this would be a project now that is in the budget.
Okay.
So it's in the CIP. It's
Yeah.
in the budget for FY25.
And then the council folks, Gil, I will put myself along with that. Would like to maybe, not maybe, I'd like to see it to go to at least the original ask of 3 million based on the return on investment. So I guess.
I
think
agree.
it's to Danny's ask about what's baseball bring in here. Holy buckets, what's the Unidome bring in here?
We've got the playoffs for, I think the contract was signed for through 2027. Do we want to risk losing those state football playoffs?
So I would
I don't-
say, since tonight we can't discuss it, but if that's
No.
something everyone shares, we can make sure in the next sessions that that's part of the ongoing conversations.
Well, if we
Touch
know
on
that,
this.
we can design the budget around what
Right.
you guys, whether it's 2 million or 3 million or
Right.
whatever it is. If currently, right now, what the conversation was last year was 2.5 million.
On the counter side to that, the extra 500, some want to add to this, we put it in someplace else to see if it falls in a park, in the ball diamonds. Because how much do we control what's going on at UNI and Unidome as a city?
How much does the Unidome contribute to our
Well, they're
community?
going to contribute whether we give them another 500,000 or not.
Not if we lose things?
Yeah,
You don't, 500,000, I don't think is going to lose anything out of it.
I still say we go back to the 5
Okay,
million.
so at this point, you
they
just
asked
need
from the first one.
consensus if we want to talk about it? Because we're not voting on it, we're just wanting to talk about it.
I'm
maybe.
talking about it, so.
I
I know,
think
but they just-
two separate things. I think
Yeah.
I think you guys just need consensus that this is in the budget and we'll be going for it. You're just kind of giving a heads up. But then we are looking for a consensus on do we want this to be one of the priority items we talk about in our next 3 sessions, which we
It
can
is.
make sure and add that to the list.
Yes.
And I have a quick update on that after we get through these, so I can touch on that.
High priority.
So just to clarify, what I just heard is that we will be talking about this project again in one of our next sessions.
Okay.
If they're wanting to increase the dollar
If-
amount, is that
Yes.
right?
Regardless, I mean, it's gonna,
Either
it's
way,
in the
we're
CIP.
in for the 2.5. It's one of the
This
lowest
is,
increases.
this is your chance to say, no, we don't want this in the CIP,
Right.
which no one's doing. We all want this in the CIP, it's just the amount should be quibbled about later.
Yep.
Okay. So again, I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time. This is kind of a unique thing that's really popped up in the last 3 to 5 months is what our VNT folks are calling kind of the sports and entertainment district. And I talked a little bit earlier about out there at the map at the Gibson property. And so we've had an individual in that's talking about potentially bringing in some whether it's additional court space or indoor turf. probably a combination of both to move forward with some of those things, and these are some of the other communities and what they've done. The individual that's come to us hasn't really had any support with from municipalities. It's been all private driven and private in some of his other communities. These are just ones that our V&T has looked at. Bettendorf, you know, they have indoor-outdoor facilities for soccer, baseball fields, those type of things. Ankeny has put together.
I think it's that way.
We could get Viridian to sponsor a big sports complex somewhere.
So
Maybe. I know a guy.
Guys.
he didn't say yes. You just know him. So anyway,
Well, that's what, is that what you're saying? Because you got these sponsors.
Said
names
yes.
sponsored?
Some are sponsored, some are not sponsored. There could be the private entity that would come in and be the person. We're not saying that the city wants to go and build the facility and run the facility. What we're saying is that working with some of these private entities that are going to come in, put these type of facilities in and manage them.
So would this be, you said that was about 60 to 80 acres? And
Yeah.
Is that what this developer is looking at? Is
No,
it-
they'd be looking at just a portion of that, maybe 10 to 15, depending on what size they build. If they're going to build just courts, if they're going to build indoor turf facility, you know, so there's some of those things. Real preliminary in all the discussions. I mean, but it's a potential that this could, you know, gain some. What's that?
What's this again?
So the gentleman that we spoke with that day, it's I don't want to tell you because Malone's here. Prints everything.
Dave, it's not public information.
So
Yeah.
is this, Ron, is this an FYI, or do you need some guidance?
So I don't think we really need any guidance on this right now. What I can tell you is as we move forward, V&T's seeing that there's a giant loss of opportunity here. I'll use the indoor turf facility. There's a number of places, whether it's soccer, whether it's the 7-on-7 football that are coming to Cedar Falls, or they're either trying to use the dome. And the problem with the dome is they work really well, but there's a significant fee if they take the turf up. Now all of a sudden it's like $7,000 or $10,000 just to put the turf back down for a weekend. So there's opportunities that are being missed because maybe the dome is got the sports show or the outdoor show or the home show that weekend. So
I think
there's opportunity. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. But going to what you were saying, I think this is a good chance for us at goal setting to talk through. We only have so many dollars, but whether the best use, I don't think we'll get through all this in goal setting. We'll probably do this as part of the comp plan and visioning, but we know we have a lot of big opportunities, and just how do we prioritize which ones are the best investments to make?
Well, and really the opportunity here is moving forward with the Gibson property development, because they would do all of the rest.
Some of these may
private
not be in
development.
this year's budget.
It
but
may
they
not.
be budgeted
It may be a
down
couple
the
of years down the
Yeah.
road, but I think part of this is an opportunity for me to inform you some of the things that are.
So what do you need from us to
No-
say?
nothing on this right now.
Okay.
So the point I was making there was the naming rights, because the Dome's presentation had naming rights for seats and suites, and
So and that would be
Same way.
that would be the private developer as he's selling those naming rights and some of those, because the city's not going to own the facility, the city's not going to run the facility. It's going to be the private developer guy.
Same thing for the Tiger Force. Name rights for everything.
Just to clarify, is this the same land that we already have that tech center master plan?
Yes. So there's and what some of this would, and there's some other interest in that area as well with medical facilities and those type of things. So anyway, have a number of slides on this just to, as you can review. Again, here's the two properties that we were talking about. I'm trying to be respectful of your time and move forward with this. Not really an ask here, but just projects that may be coming forward. Here's the platted area that was in the Creekside Technology Master Plan. The conversation was, you know, are they looking at maybe this and or this, depending on the size of what they're doing, so. Again, a ton of questions here. Again, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the water reclamation. Again, we're looking at moving forward with this. Final report's been submitted to the DNR. You see all the check lines. Construction is now going to be a 3-year time period. Looks like we're going to start construction in 2028. And again, we're running all this through the DNR to make sure that we're in compliance with all of our effluent.
What do we got set aside so far?
I don't know what the...
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but you're right. When we set our sewer rates, we did it so we're building up cash so we don't have to bond as much, so.
We're on target?
Yeah, I was just gonna look to see.
That's on target?
Well, I mean, the problem is, of course, is every year it seems like the cost goes up, though, is the problem, you know, that's the problem. But, because like right now in the sewer fund, we have about like 15 million in our sewer fund right now. And so, yes, have we accumulated some dollars? Yeah, I mean, but we also understand it's a $125 million project too.
And remember, we allocated the ARPA dollars.
Yep.
For the water rec, and some of those will be spent on Main Street as well, so. So again, Main Street project, as Chase gave an update to council here a little while ago. You know, we've got the 3 years of construction, finishing up with the first one, looking at moving that forward. And here's really the construction of some of those. Trying to go really fast right now, and I'm tired of talking. So.
Not to stall that out, but do you have a dollar figure on the mini Campanile on the Sterling roundabout? I've had a lot of people ask about it.
I'd have to go back and...
Total dollar figure for just that structure? I don't know.
We'd have to
I
go
know
back and pull it out.
Landscaping and the whole corridor, I can get that number, but we can break out that.
Yeah, please send that to me.
He's only got one more slide.
Yeah, listen.
So,
Okay.
so there we go.
No, we're done.
Yep, we're done. So this is the starting point for what, a week from Thursday. So thank you all, and over to you, Danny.
Thank you guys for putting all that together. Really